Her grandpa gifted her a farm, but she never expected it to be right inside the royal palace. And right next door to the king's bedchamber, no less. Every morning, His Majesty wakes up to the lovely scent of manure. At first, Mary was a bit worried. I mean, the king is famously ruthless. But then she thought, hey, I've got the permits and the title deed. Who's afraid of him? So, she gritted her teeth, braced herself, and moved right in. The very next day, while she was happily cleaning up her new farm, 3 young guys suddenly showed up. Seeing Mary pulling weeds, they honestly thought she was out of her mind. Trying to farm inside the royal palace? They immediately ordered the guards to drag her out. Mary put her hands on her hips. I'd like to see you try. Then, she triumphantly whipped out all her official paperwork. The guy took one look and realized the papers were actually legit. So, he tried to buy the plot off her for a massive payout. But she finally had a farm of her very own. Mary wasn't going to sell it for any amount of money. Seeing this, the guy had no choice but to report back to the king. Hearing this, the king sneered. Ha, what a greedy peasant. Strip them naked and toss them out onto the streets. The guy awkwardly scratched his head and said, Your Majesty, she's a 20-something-year-old girl. The king froze, suddenly extremely awkward. The ministers below immediately burst into murmurs, making the king incredibly irritated. He assumed Mary was just doing all this to get his attention. So, he straight up issued a gag order. Every single person in the palace was ordered to completely ignore the owner of Plot 79. They had to pretend she never existed at all. Right then, the Minister of the Interior, Cambert, stepped up. He confidently vowed to take care of the situation himself. That very night, he marched over to the farm and found Mary, who was happily munching on some cookies in her house. Seeing someone walk in and noticing that shiny badge on his chest, she instantly knew this guy was some high-ranking official. So, she warmly welcomed him in. After all, he was the farm's very first guest. Mary figured she'd treat him to some coffee and cookies. But when Cambert saw her set up, plenty of food and drinks, he realized, damn, she's actually planning to live here permanently. That absolutely wouldn't do. He had to teach this little opportunist a harsh lesson. Glancing around, he spotted a straw hat, and immediately started lecturing the hat, running his mouth non-stop. Mary had absolutely no idea why he was talking to a hat. Cambert just shrugged and told her to give up the fight. The king has issued a gag order, he said. In other words, you're socially dead. Mary listened to this and thought, I honestly don't give a damn. As long as it doesn't mess with my farming, do whatever you want. This pissed Cambert off so much he was fuming. So, he pulled out his ultimate secret weapon. He was the Minister of the Interior, after all. He knew every single law and regulation inside out. He could list at least a dozen legal reasons to demolish this place right now and seize the land. Mary panicked. Oh no, that's not gonna work. I have to stop him. She grabbed the dirty tablecloth and violently shook it outright in his face. The dust choked Cambert instantly. Desperate to protect his ridiculously expensive suit, he dropped a vicious threat, spun around, and stormed out. Looking at her messy room, Mary suddenly felt incredibly down. She thought back to her Aunt Martha. Every time those sour-faced tax collectors showed up at her door, Aunt Martha would warmly host them and leave everyone smiling. But Mary? She couldn't even handle a simple thing like this. And that Minister of the Interior, is he even human? Since the moment he stepped into this house, he hasn't shown a single ounce of empathy. Suddenly, a thought hit her. She frantically dashed outside to catch up to Cambert. Hey, she yelled. You really want a cup of coffee, don't you? But you're banned from having it. Hearing this, Cambert's whole body jolted. Seeing his reaction, Mary knew she hit the nail on the head. She enthusiastically invited him to come back to the farm tomorrow. I promise, you won't be disappointed. She beamed. Cambert had absolutely no clue what she was plotting. But his curiosity was definitely sparked. Watching him leave, Mary felt a massive weight lift off her shoulders. She skipped off, brought back a huge basket of fresh grass, threw on that same straw hat, and headed right back out. Because of the king's strict gag order. But honestly, this suited Mary perfectly. This way, she could openly and proudly looking for what she wanted. Soon, she found a patch of plump, juicy sweet berries. She picked a full basket. After returning home, she kept busy until the middle of the night. The next day, the Minister of Internal Affairs woke up bright and early, and even gave orders to his men to get ready for the demolition work. But when he arrived at Mary's door, he found it completely quiet inside. As soon as he opened the door, he saw an exhausted Mary with dark circles under her eyes. Mary warmly invited him to sit down, and even prepared some tea and snacks for him. Cambert was furious when he saw it was coffee. She knew perfectly well that he couldn't drink coffee. But Mary told him this coffee was different from the rest. Although he didn't quite believe her, he still picked up the cup and examined it closely. It really didn't look like anything harmful. He took a tiny sip, and instantly, his eyes went wide. The flavor was rich and smooth, paired with a wonderful aroma. It tasted exactly like coffee, but it wasn't coffee at all. He couldn't help but gulp down 3 big mouthfuls. Mary explained that this was peasant's coffee, made from a weed called chicory. Cambert was amazed and quickly asked her how she did it. Mary smiled and explained, "You just roast the roots and grind them into a powder." Although it's slightly different from real coffee, she knew exactly how to roast it to recreate that exact coffee flavor. Hearing this, Cambert gave a look of sudden realization. Suddenly, he remembered the gag order. How could he just ignore the decree and talk to Mary? Just then, Mary brought out that straw hat, telling him not to worry. He was just talking to the straw hat. Hearing this, the minister looked at Mary again, and suddenly found her much more pleasing to the eye. He took another gentle sip. It had been a long time since he felt this comfortable. Cambert felt so happy that he started talking more. He said that because working at the royal palace was so exhausting, he had to rely on coffee to keep himself awake. On average, he was drinking about 7 or 8 cups a day. Later on, he didn't know when it started, but he began experiencing dizziness and nausea. His heart would pound non-stop, and at night, he couldn't sleep for days on end. The doctor told him that if he didn't quit coffee immediately, he could drop dead at any moment. His misery began that very day. Sometimes, when he was too exhausted, he secretly drank it a few times. But every time he drank it, his body would reject it. His stomach would churn, and his heart would race wildly. But today, this was totally different. No matter how much he drank, his body felt absolutely fine. Mary explained that chicory is actually a healthy vegetable. Its roots can even help with digestion and strengthen the stomach. The commoners couldn't afford expensive coffee, so they invented this peasant's coffee instead. Even though it looks like a useless weed, it definitely has its own special purpose. Cambert finally understood Mary's intention. "You must be trying to teach me a lesson through this. Because I said farming was useless yesterday, you got mad, right?" Mary quickly waved her hands. "No, it's not because of that at all. Well, even though that comment did hurt my feelings, I completely forgot about it soon after. The real reason I stayed up all night making this coffee is because you are a guest at the Oleroni farm, my lord. And our very first guest, too. So I wanted to do everything I could to serve you the coffee you love. I farmed simply because I love doing it." Suddenly, Mary remembered she had also prepared a dessert. Cambert didn't really like sweets, but seeing the look of pure anticipation on Mary's face, he decided to pretend he liked it just to humor her. But one bite changed everything. He almost swallowed his own tongue. It was sweet but not overpowering, with a wonderfully natural flavor. Mary said, "Since the sweet berries already have naturally sweet juice, there's no need to add any extra sugar." These sweet berries were all picked right from His Majesty's grand courtyard. Hearing this, Cambert was so shocked that he jumped straight to his feet. Shortly after, Cambert devoured an entire sweet berry pie, along with 3 cups of coffee. Mary was just about to pour him another cup, but Cambert waved his hand, signaling that he was already completely stuffed. Seeing him looking so satisfied with the meal, Mary finally brought up the main issue. She wanted to explain exactly how she legally owned this piece of land, and to make it clear that she wasn't trying to sell it for a huge profit, but that she genuinely just wanted to farm here. Before she could even finish, Cambert cut in and said he knew. Mary was completely taken aback. She hadn't even explained anything yet, but Cambert looked as though he had made up his mind about something. He stood up and prepared to take his leave. In the end, though, he just couldn't resist Mary's warm hospitality, and ended up heading home fully loaded with bags of all sizes. A soldier asked him, "Wait, didn't you say there was demolition work to do here?" Cambert froze for a second, then just said, "Dismissed." Even after returning to his estate, he was still in a fantastic mood. He had his staff clear his entire schedule for the day, and then dug out a massive, thick book. He needed to verify something specific. It didn't take long for him to find it, and sure enough, it was exactly as he had thought. It looked like a breath of fresh air was about to sweep through the royal palace. That afternoon, Mary received the basket Cambert sent back, along with a letter. When she opened it, she saw that Cambert had first started with a polite apology. But the rest of the contents made Mary literally squeal out loud. Cambert had come up with a flawless solution for her. To keep the farm. Now, in principle, private territory was absolutely forbidden inside the royal palace. However, there was one single exception, a salon established specifically for noblewomen. Even though this particular law was incredibly old, it still held full legal weight in the royal statutes. Because of this loophole, absolutely no one could kick her out of there. Right around that time, someone handed the king a newspaper. The moment he opened it, his face instantly darkened. The headline read, "The Conqueror King Gets Conquered." It turned out this was Louis' deliberate attempt to publicly mock him. A farm, right inside the Grand Royal Palace. The king was totally exasperated. This Louis never missed a single chance to make fun of him. The cat-eared guy standing nearby tried to calm him down, telling him to just wait it out. "Haven't you already issued a gag order?" he pointed out. "Besides, you saw that house, right? There's a massive hole in the roof. It's going to collapse any day now. Pretty soon, all you'll see out that window is a pile of rubble." Hearing this made the king feel a little bit better. Louis, on the other hand, didn't want to wait another day. She was determined to make Mary understand That stepping onto that land was a terrible mistake. Meanwhile, Mary had also quickly noticed the giant hole in her roof. She tried to pump herself up. Don't get discouraged. I can definitely fix this. But you know how it is. When it rains, it pours. Just as she was climbing up, the ladder snapped clean in half. She grabbed some nails and tried to repair it, but even after exhausting herself, she just couldn't hammer the stupid things in. To make matters worse, her stomach was growling loudly. She stood up and glanced to the side. She spotted an arrow. She had no idea who it belonged to, but the quality actually looked pretty good. I can totally repurpose this into a kitchen tool later, she thought. Up on his balcony, the king was watching this entire scene unfold. He couldn't believe Mary was this stubborn. It looked like the arrow he had shot at her that morning had been a complete waste of effort. How the hell am I going to get rid of her? He wondered. Then he remembered what the cat-eared guy said about the house collapsing eventually. He couldn't help but think, man, if only a massive rainstorm would hit right about now. Down below, Mary had already dug up a huge bag of potatoes. She was trying to figure out the best way to cook them, and soon enough, an idea popped into her head. She would slice the potatoes super thin to make crispy potato pancakes, and top them with cheese and a fresh herb salad. To top it all off, she'd open a bottle of fruit wine. And of course, to make the meal absolutely perfect, she definitely needed a dessert. So, she sneaked back into the king's rear garden. Right by the fountain, in a little grove of trees, she spotted some May green apples. Compared to regular apples, these bright green May apples had a super tart and sour bite to them. People usually mistook them for being completely inedible. But the truth was, if you just knew the right way to cook them, they were actually incredibly delicious. Mary was right in the middle of her prep work, when suddenly, she heard a flurry of footsteps right behind her. She turned around to look. She noticed several figures in black had slipped into the room. They wore dark cloaks, with pale faces, and an absolutely terrifying gaze. It was the Holy Flame Knights, one of the 4 major knight orders guarding the Empire. Mary felt a surge of panic. Gripping her weapon tightly, she demanded to know what they wanted. But the knights just stood there, staring at her in dead silence. Suddenly, Mary figured out their game plan. They were trying to use sheer intimidation to break her, and run her off the property. Even though the farm was legally protected right now, their murderous, bloodthirsty aura still gave Mary the creeps. She shook her head hard to snap out of it. She figured, well, they can't exactly use brute force to kick me out anyway, so let them stand there if they want to. Fast forward 2 hours, and those knights were still standing there, completely frozen. Just as Mary was racking her brain over what to do next, she suddenly heard the unmistakable rumble of an empty stomach. She turned around and squinted at them. Yep, that was definitely a stomach growling. Then she thought about their age. They were right at that age where you're always starving. And hey, if their stomachs growl, that means they're just human after all, right? Suddenly, it all clicked for Mary. The scene shifts. Louis glared at her subordinates, absolutely fuming. So let me get this straight. I sent you out there to crush her with overwhelming force. And instead, right in the middle of a tactical operation, your stomach started rumbling? And then, food magically appears in front of you, and you claim you heard some voice from the cosmos telling you to eat it? One of the lackeys nodded frantically, saying yes, her cooking was just too good. Another one chimed in, exactly. I inhaled 4 whole bowls. I swear I almost ate the plate, too. Louis fell into deep thought. Why would that rogue of a woman go out of her way to cook a meal for my men? The subordinate shrugged, saying he had no clue. All I saw was her washing these weird chunks of dirt. Then she tossed them over the fire. I even saw her chopping up blocks of wood. Louis jolted in her seat. Wait, are you saying she's a witch? The subordinate waved his hands frantically. No, no, no. I still have no idea what that dirt was, but I am 100% sure the wood was actually meat. And honestly, her food feels like it's cursed with some kind of dark magic. You take one bite, and you are totally hooked for life. Suddenly, Louis remembered that Team 3 was out there right now. She leapt up and stormed straight toward the farm. When she finally reached the property, she was fully expecting the place to be completely trashed by her squad. But to her shock, everything was absolutely spotless. Then, her eyes landed on a fruit and veggie tart sitting on the table. Does it really taste as magically delicious as those idiots claimed? Full of skepticism, she picked up a slice and popped it into her mouth. She chewed slowly, then licked her lips. That was just a tiny crumb. I didn't really get a good taste. So, she grabbed a huge chunk and took a massive bite. Oh my god, this is unbelievably good. The absolute second it hit her tongue, she tasted the crisp, refreshing burst of the fruit. Perfectly wrapped in the soft, sweet embrace of the veggie glaze. This was way better than anything you'd find at the most elite pastry shops. Suddenly, Louis completely understood what her men were raving about. Just as Louis was scarfing it down in pure ecstasy, Mary suddenly popped up right behind her. You know, that goes perfectly with a hot cup of coffee. Louis nearly jumped out of her skin and started coughing violently. Watching her choke, Mary winced. Oops. Maybe I should have said hi first. She quickly handed over a mug of coffee. Went down the wrong pipe, huh? Here, drink this, it'll help wash it down. Louis snatched the cup, and immediately, this incredibly rich, unique aroma hit her nose. Gulp, gulp, gulp. She chugged down more than half the mug in seconds. She was already craving another bite of the food. And the coffee somehow made her want it even more. But there was only half of the veggie tart left. How in the world was she going to find a good excuse to devour the rest of it without looking completely pathetic? Right then, Louis realized just how incredibly annoying that gag order really was. Seriously, why on earth did the king issue such a brainless decree? Seeing her literally drooling over the plate, Mary caught the hint. She grabbed a random straw hat nearby and smiled. Hey, I actually have a magical straw hat right here that understands human speech. Lou's eyes went wide. Holy crap, is that a loophole? She leaned right into the hat and started frantically apologizing. I'm so sorry, but the flavor, it's just too ridiculously delicious. I completely lost my mind and couldn't stop eating. Mary just beamed, absolutely thrilled that someone loved her cooking so much. She told her to hurry up and finish the rest, insisting she shouldn't hold back. Louis couldn't stop praising it as she took bite after bite. Her cooking skills were absolutely incredible. In the past, Louis always believed that desserts had to be strictly sweet. Even the slightest hint of sourness would completely gross her out. But this veggie and fruit tart was completely different. It was clearly tangy, yet somehow it tasted absolutely amazing. Little Straw Hat Mary eagerly explained her cooking process, leaving Louis completely mind-blown. So you can actually do it like this? She thought. Mary explained that farmers will always give any crop a taste, no matter what it is. Even if it tastes terrible at first, they'll always find the perfect way to cook it up. Hearing her say that made it taste even better to Louis, especially this amazing fruit veggie jam. If you drizzled this over some sweet vanilla ice cream, oh, it would be heaven. Or if you spread it on some fluffy milk bread. Even mixing it into ice-cold sparkling water would be fantastic. Mary was so thrilled hearing this that her little pigtails practically bounced with joy. You really seem to love desserts. Mary giggled. Louis sighed, explaining that she had always wanted to be a holy knight. But when she was little, whenever she ate sweets, the boys would mock her for being a girl. That was why she always pretended to hate desserts. Mary gasped. That's when she finally realized that this guy was actually a woman. Louis was just as shocked. Wait, you actually don't know who I am? I'm Louis, the commander of the Holy Flame Knights. I'm 22 years old, and yes, I'm a girl. Mary had guessed she was some sort of high-ranking noble, but she never imagined she was the commander, let alone the famous historical figure that actually appeared on her school exams. Rumor had it that one of the king's most trusted confidants was a knight who cross-dressed as a man. But I never in my wildest dreams thought you'd look this much like a guy. Mary exclaimed. Louis quickly shot back. Hey, I may dress like one, but my heart is all woman. You can just think of me as an older sister who happens to know a little bit of sword fighting. Mary's face lit up with pure joy. Would you really want to be the girl next door to Little Straw Hat? She asked. But just as Louis was about to say yes, one of her subordinates suddenly walked into the room. Louis froze like a deer in the headlights. Oh my god, what do I do? They totally just saw me acting all girly. How the heck am I supposed to discipline these guys from now on? Without looking back, she bolted out the door. Mary felt a tiny pang of disappointment. Ah, such a genius taste tester just ran away. Meanwhile, as soon as Louis got back, her friends instantly started scolding her. They were incredibly disappointed in her. They even insisted that this whole thing was just a massive conspiracy cooked up by Mary. She's just using delicious food to butter people up. They warned, if she were truly that innocent and sweet, then how on earth would she know how to exploit legal loopholes to open her salon? Hearing this, Louis fell into deep thought. Could I really have been played by Mary? She wondered, but then, her eyes landed on Lord Cambert standing nearby. Wait a minute. If opening that salon wasn't actually Mary's idea? What if someone had been pulling the strings for her? Someone with expert legal knowledge, incredible analytical skills, and the absolute ruthlessness to execute such a plan? Who else could it possibly be other than the cunning Minister of Internal Affairs, Cambert? Plus, there was that unmistakable scent of coffee lingering on him. Louis instantly figured it out. It was Cambert who had been secretly helping Miss Mary all along. Once she realized the minister was backing Mary, Louis made a swift decision. She was absolutely going to join his side. After all, the food Mary made was just way too ridiculously good. Later that night, completely exhausted from the day, Mary collapsed onto her bed. She lay there stressing about the gaping hole in her roof. If it rains over the next few days, I am totally screwed. But suddenly, she noticed the hole was completely gone. Mary was stunned. Wait, did some kind of magical guardian angel fix this? She sprinted outside to check, only to be totally shocked. The entire courtyard was perfectly stacked with chopped firewood. Not only that, but her busted old ladder had been swapped out for a shiny new one. Just then, a single red rose gently floated down from above. Along with it came a tiny little card. When she opened it, she finally realized, the knights had done all of this as a huge thank you for her food. The very next morning, the king woke up in an excellent mood, eager to see if the house next door had finally caved in. But when he looked over, the house looked freaking better than it did yesterday. What the hell is this? He fumed. Wasn't that piece of junk supposed to collapse? All the energy completely drained from his body. Annoyed, he turned his head and spotted Louis casually strolling around down below. He immediately started yelling at her to get her butt up there, aggressively pointing at the house and demanding Louis take a look. After reading it, Louis suddenly felt a guilty pang, frantically trying to figure out how to wash her hands of the whole mess. But seeing how determined the king was to get to the bottom of things, she quickly blurted out. I don't know anything, don't ask me, I've gotta run. Not long after scurrying away, she bumped into Mary, who was struggling to carry 2 heavy buckets of water. She casually grabbed one of the buckets to help out and said hi. When Mary looked up and saw who it was, you sure have thick skin, she remarked, and then asked her about it. Louis explained that the knights wouldn't be coming around anymore. Since the farm was now completely legal and up to code, the patrols had been cancelled. Hearing this, Mary actually looked a bit disappointed. Truth be told, she had really been looking forward to those knights visiting. After setting the bucket down, Louis turned to leave, but Mary quickly stopped her. You still have half a fruit and veggie tart left over from yesterday. Why don't you finish it before you go? The moment Louis heard there was food, all thoughts of leaving vanished. As she happily munched away, she invited Mary to hang out together on Sunday, but Mary turned her down without a second thought. Feeling totally crushed, Louis asked her why. Mary thought about it for a second and said she still had some fields left to plow. Never in her wildest dreams did Louis think she would one day lose out to farm work. Well, can I help you plow the fields then? To this, Mary didn't object at all. She even told her to wear something comfortable. In the blink of an eye, Sunday rolled around. Louis showed up looking the part, even carrying a hoe over her shoulder. After meeting up with 2 of her subordinates, she got ready to head over to Mary's farm. But as bad luck would have it, they bumped right into Cayenne and Siegfried. Cayenne was busy sharpening his claws on a nearby tree. Just as he was about to say something to Louis, snap! A broken branch smacked him right on the head. Now, this wasn't just any tree. It was national treasure number 354. Everyone called it the General. Seeing this, Louis and Siegfried were absolutely terrified. Analyzing a national treasure with undeniable proof, Cayenne instantly dropped to his knees in despair. He quickly stuck out his tail, trying to sweep the broken branch out of sight, but Louis snatched it right out of his hands. Looking closely, they realized that the general was actually starting to rot from the inside. Everyone gasped in shock. How could the general be sick? Louis whirled around and furiously scolded Cayenne. I told you to quit that nasty habit of yours, but did you listen? No. Now look what you've done. What are we going to do if anyone finds out? Cayenne hung his head in shame. According to the special national treasure law, I'll be stripped of my rank and forced to step down as the Holy Knight Commander. Louis screamed in sheer panic, then hurry up and think of a way to fix it. Siegfried calmly chimed in, the only way out of this is to cure the tree. Hearing this, Cayenne shot straight up into the air. Do either of you know how to heal a tree? Siegfried mentioned that Laurent probably had some experience with this sort of thing. Louis immediately shut that down. Oh, give me a break. If he finds out about this, we are all dead meat. At those words, Cayenne instantly deflated like a popped balloon. Just then, a certain someone popped into Louis's mind. A short while later, a very bewildered Mary stared at the 3 people who had just unexpectedly shown up at her door. She asked them what was going on. Louis cried out, our general is sick. Mary looked completely lost. Who's the general? Louis quickly explained that the general was an old elm tree. He's the mascot of the royal palace's training grounds. But now, he's suddenly gotten sick. With a heavy thud, Cayenne fell to his knees. It's all my fault. This whole time, I've been using his trunk as a scratching post. That's gotta be the main reason he's sick. Louis chimed in, if word of this gets out, we're totally screwed. Cayenne will have to hand over his position as commander of the Holy Wind Knights. Siegfried added softly, Cayenne didn't do it on purpose. The general is just temporarily ill. If we can just heal it quickly, everything will be fine. Cayenne kept his head bowed in utter defeat. But we don't know the first thing about trees. After listening to their frantic rambling, Mary casually said, just leave it to me. I know how to cure it. A ray of hope instantly lit up the trio's faces. After Mary gave the tree a thorough checkup, she discovered that its condition was way worse than they had imagined. It needed immediate treatment, but because they had rushed over in such a panic, they hadn't brought any supplies. 10 minutes later, however, everything was perfectly set up. Mary started by carefully digging out all the rotting wood. Then, she grabbed a bottle of wine. She chugged it all down in one go, leaving Cayenne absolutely dumbfounded. Wait, so you made me fetch the wine just so you could drink it yourself? But what Mary did next confused him even more. Mary explained that wine corks are actually made from the bark of cork oak trees. So we can use them to replace the bark, acting as a new coat for Lord General. The wine from the royal palace is guaranteed to have high quality, sturdy corks. I want to use these to protect the areas where Lord General is most severely damaged. Soon, Mary finished patching up all the spots. Now, the rest was up to Lord General himself. Let's let him rest for the night and check back tomorrow. At this point, Mary was still extremely confident in her handiwork. But at dawn the next day, Mary discovered that Lord General hadn't improved even a little bit. Cayenne was also feeling a bit down. Mary comforted him, saying maybe it just needed more time. Let's keep an eye on him for another day. But by the third day, Lord General still hadn't gotten any better. Cayenne had already given up hope and was bracing himself to be fired, but Mary refused to just throw in the towel. On the way back, she kept racking her brain, wondering if she had missed something. She carefully played back every single detail of what they had done. Suddenly, it hit her. Because Lord General was rotting so badly and swarming with bugs, she had been totally misled by the symptoms. She had to quickly check if her hunch was right. After digging up some of the dirt, she found it was exactly as she suspected. With no time to explain everything to the group, Mary ordered them to hurry and gather lime powder and cabbages. Given Lord General's massive size, they'd need about 30 to 40 cabbages. Seeing her act like this, the three of them realized she actually had a plan. Mary carefully inspected the condition of the roots again, even though they really didn't look good. Thank goodness it wasn't too late to save him. Shortly after, Mary buried the lime deep into the soil and planted the cabbages all around him. She revealed that Lord General had actually been poisoned. The three were shocked. Did someone try to assassinate him? Mary nodded. Exactly. And he was very nearly killed by it. Killed by a poison called friendship. Mary asked them if something had happened recently. That made everyone so worried about his health. Cayenne suddenly looked very guilty and fidgety. Earlier, everyone had caught him sharpening his claws on Lord General's trunk. They all warned him that if he kept doing that, Lord General was bound to get seriously hurt sooner or later. Mary pretty much guessed the rest of the story. So, after hearing what they said, you decided to do something about it. But you weren't the only one. The other two were just as worried about him, and they did the exact same thing. All three of you, without telling each other, gave Lord General fertilizer. Mary explained that this was exactly where the problem lay. All three of you chose boron fertilizer. The boron levels in the soil went dangerously high, which resulted in Lord General's poisoning. And the symptoms of boron poisoning look incredibly similar to pest damage. Since this is my very first time seeing this happen to such a massive tree, I completely missed it at first. Mary really wanted to know just how much fertilizer they had actually dumped on him. Mary went on to explain that lime can block the roots from absorbing the boron. And since cabbages are crops that naturally soak up boron, Lord General was definitely going to pull through. She asked everyone to just give him a little more time. 4 days later, the group discovered that Lord General had indeed bounced back, full of vibrant life. Cayenne suddenly let out a sigh, reflecting that while friendship is great, sometimes acting out of good intentions for a friend can actually make a huge mess. After saying this, he turned around, only to find Mary's spot completely empty. He then noticed she was already sprinting far off into the distance. Cayenne was instantly left speechless. Louis chuckled, saying, "That's just how she is. Once she finishes what she needs to do, she rushes straight back to her beloved farm." Siegfried chimed in, "But wait, we haven't even thanked her yet." The two exchanged a look, realizing they had completely misunderstood her before. She really wasn't some cunning opportunist after all. The king decided he wasn't going to just sit around and wait. "So, you want to farm, do you? Then I'll hit you with a massive downpour and see how well you farm." With that, the king summoned the sage, Rasta, and officially approved his artificial rain experiment. And the test site, directly above Mary's farm. At the exact same time, Laurent was taking his best friend's twin little sisters out on a spring picnic. And as luck would have it, they were right near Mary's farm. When the twins noticed Laurent dozing off, they shared a mischievous look, instantly coming up with a fun idea. So, they started braiding his hair into tiny pigtails. Laurent saw how much fun they were having, so he decided to just pretend he was still asleep. But a little while later, he actually did fall fast asleep. After playing with his hair for a bit, the twins got bored. They wandered off to the side to pick flowers and make flower crowns. But right at that moment, the sky suddenly unleashed a torrential rainstorm. You see, children of the Saxon family are incredibly fragile before the age of 10. Even a tiny, simple cold could very well cost them their lives. And as if things couldn't get worse, the two little ones had gotten completely lost. Within minutes, their clothes were absolutely drenched by the freezing rain. The younger sister was shivering uncontrollably from the cold. Barely able to stand, she cried out, "Sister, I'm so cold." If they stayed out there like this, her life would be in serious danger. The older sister screamed for help, desperately hoping someone would come to their rescue. But soon, her voice grew weaker and weaker, and her eyelids started to feel incredibly heavy. Just then, through her blurred vision, she saw someone walking toward them through the storm. She just couldn't hold on any longer, and completely passed out. Mary grabbed them, carrying one against her chest, and the other tightly on her back. She rushed them back into her farmhouse, and then immediately braved the pouring rain to head back outside. She gathered an armful of fox mint, and brewed it all down into a potent medicine. Mary carefully spoon-fed the medicine to them, drop by drop. Not long after, the two little girls finally fluttered their eyes open. Seeing that they were awake, Mary quickly told them not to speak to her. She even told them they had to pretend she wasn't there at all. The two little girls were pretty confused by what she meant at first, but their wild imaginations quickly filled in the blanks. "You're a fairy, aren't you?" They giggled, feeling so warm and safe. "Wow, a fairy actually saved us." Mary tried to explain the truth, but the little ones were getting way too excited to listen to a word she said. Meanwhile, Laurent was frantically searching everywhere for the twins. He was practically eating himself alive with guilt. Something terrible actually happens to these girls. How could I ever face Siegfried again? Suddenly, he spotted a small hairbow dropped on the ground. And the only place nearby was Mary's farm. He burst through Mary's front door, and sure enough, there were the twins, sitting safely with her. As soon as the girls saw Laurent, they chirped, "Did you come to hide from the rain at the fairy's house too?" Hearing the way they spoke, Mary instantly realized they knew him. It was pretty obvious he was the one who lost the kids. She was just about to signal to Laurent not to worry, when one of the little girls excitedly interrupted. "The big sister fairy found us. And she even gave us special fairy medicine. She dried our clothes for us. Oh, and she made us the most yummy cream soup ever." Laurent finally pieced together what had happened. Mary could tell he desperately wanted to say something to her. So, she simply pointed at a straw hat resting nearby. "Since I don't have a free hand to grab that straw hat right now. If you have anything you want to say, please, say it to the hat." Hearing this, Laurent's face instantly burned a deep, embarrassed red. He realized he had been horribly misunderstanding Mary this entire time. If it hadn't been for this lady, who was forced under a strict gag order, then my friends and I would have suffered a devastating tragedy today. It was a massive debt of gratitude he could never possibly repay. Right at that moment, Louis and Cayenne dropped by the farm for a visit. They were completely stunned to see the twins sitting there. The little ones enthusiastically waved and called out to them. Cayenne froze, a jolt going through his body. He could already guess exactly what had happened. One of the little girls tugged on Cayenne's sleeve. "Mister, hurry up and say hello to the fairy of the forest." Cayenne shot a glance at Mary, who looked just a little bit smug, and gently told the girls that she wasn't actually a fairy. "And besides, we can't exactly do that right now. Say hi to the owner of this house." The little ones didn't get why they had to do that. Cayenne explained it was the king's order, because His Majesty actually thought she was going to ruin our country. So, he ordered everyone to completely ignore her. The two little ones were totally shocked to hear this. But she's obviously not a bad person. Why would the king give an order like that? Louis spoke up for Mary, too. Even little kids understand this. Yet some grown-ups are just completely blind to it. Laurent knew she was taking a jab at him. So, he immediately made his stance clear. This is going too far. Everyone is equal. Why should she be treated like she's invisible? Louis chimed in. Now you get it, right? But this wasn't over yet. The king still had absolutely no clue what was going on. It wasn't until Laurent went to him and explained everything that he realized how serious things were. Laurent told him, because of the gag order, I can't even say her name. And I definitely can't express my gratitude to her. So now, using my authority from the Royal Advisory Council, I am making a formal request. Please revoke that order. It's severely damaging the Empire's reputation and the pride of our Imperial Knights. I'm talking about the gag order that went into effect on May 2nd. The king's mind was spinning. Was this really all because of his own prejudice? Did he completely misunderstand her? Then what was she really trying to achieve? Did she really just want to farm, exactly like she said? Louis chimed in too. Laurent is absolutely right. Charging ahead recklessly on your own might work out on the battlefield. But the royal palace is completely different. Otherwise, why would we even have an advisory council? The king was getting really annoyed by their constant nagging. He snapped, of course I'll take responsibility for this. Louis immediately looked at him with hopeful little eyes, but the king quickly changed his tune. Yes, I made the wrong call. But that is all I'm willing to admit. There is absolutely no way I am apologizing to her. Cayenne cheerfully replied, we totally get how you feel. In that case, let's not force it. From now on, we'll just go our separate ways. But what are you going to do about your little mistake today? Hearing this, the king began to think seriously. Meanwhile, after the heavy pouring rain finally stopped, Mary took the two little ones out. They were farming and playing outside, just as the three of them were having the time of their lives. The little ones noticed Laurent approaching. Laurent ran over, screaming, Miss Mary. Mary frantically crossed her arms in an X, gesturing, there's no Miss Mary here. But Laurent totally ignored her warnings. Miss Mary, thank you so much for saving me from that crisis today. From this day forward, all the elves of Britannia will forever consider you our dearest friend. While Mary was still standing there completely bewildered, Louis grabbed her hand. Thank you for feeding my starving men, and for letting me taste the most delicious veggie tart in the entire world. I swear, everyone from the Louis Regaliardo and Nobly bloodlines will become your loyal friends. Cayenne rushed forward too. The Lombard family goes without saying. And every single catkin from the ninth slope will forever look up to you as our hero. Siegfried chimed in as well. I will always remember how you saved the two heirs of the Saxon family. None of us in the family will ever forget your kindness. Mary looked at them, completely worried. Guys, what are you doing? What about the gag order on me? The order has already been revoked. Cambert said as he walked toward them. From now on, Miss Mary, you can talk to us as freely as you want. Saying this, he pulled a land deed from his coat and handed it to her. His Majesty admits he made a massive mistake regarding the site for the artificial rain experiment. So, to make up for the huge loss caused to Miss Mary's farm, as an apology, His Majesty has decided to gift a plot of state-owned land to Miss Mary. The farm has been expanded by half a plot in both the front and the back. Mary never expected to actually receive compensation, and was instantly moved by everyone's efforts. But she said she couldn't accept it, because he had completely trashed so many of her seedlings. Cambert told her, no one is forcing you to forgive His Majesty. Forgiveness and compensation are two totally different things. This is what you deserve, Miss Mary. Since he ruined your crops, he should pay the proper price for it. Mary thought about it and realized he was right. His Majesty ruined my fields. If I just let it slide, that's letting him off way too easy. So, she accepted the compensation. Just then, Louis chimed in. Hey, do you want to treat us to a huge, delicious feast? Hearing this, Siegfried snapped. What kind of nonsense are you spouting? We should be the ones hosting. But before he could even finish, Mary had already agreed. Alright everyone, come over for dinner tomorrow night. But you'll all need to bring your own stools. Naturally, Cayenne, being the absolute show-off that he is, chose to lug over the biggest chair he could find. Compared to the joyous laughter echoing through the farm, the king's palace felt awfully cold and lonely. He took a bite of his steak. So bitter. He took a sip of red wine. This is bitter, too. Just as the king was feeling a bit down, Cambert, the minister of the royal household, walked in. Why is your Majesty dining all alone today? Do you not even have a single friend to talk to? The king let out a cold scoff. I simply went out to attend an appointment, that's all. Cambert thought to himself, yeah right, just keep pretending. Nothing in this world is flawless. You really should learn to accept that. The king retorted, if you woke up every single morning to the unbearable stench of fertilizer, you wouldn't be saying that. Cambert let out a long sigh. Well, it's certainly better than the stench of blood on a battlefield, isn't it? Maybe you'll actually get used to it if you just keep smelling it. The king clearly didn't want to continue this topic. Just sit down first. Try the prawns and oysters that were just brought in. But Cambert replied, compared to the food getting cold right here, I'm honestly much more curious about what the very first dinner at Mary's farm will be like. Even if it's just to catch a whiff of it. Thankfully, I can freely come and go from the farm. The king was baffled. Wait, isn't a farm a place where anyone can just come and go as they please anyway? Cambert shook his head. Not at all. If it's a guest the farm owner dislikes, she can just order her loyal knights to toss that person right out at any given moment. Hearing this, the king couldn't help but feel like he was being directly targeted. Then, Cambert pulled out a gift box. I just came by to drop this off. The king opened it up, and to his surprise, it was chocolate. Cambert said, I figured you wouldn't have much of an appetite. It's truly a pity that the mighty king of the empire doesn't even have the power to choose his own neighbors. That night, the king sat all alone on his balcony, secretly gazing at the little cabin on the farm next door. He couldn't help but wonder, what kind of magic did that place hold to make everyone change so drastically after just one visit? And what kind of person was the owner there, anyway? The very next day, the king dug out 2 small vials of potion. He picked one up and squeezed a few drops into his eyes. In the blink of an eye, his crimson pupils turned pitch black. Then, he sprayed the other vial onto his hair. His blonde locks instantly turned jet black as well. The king looked in the mirror, looking quite satisfied with his new look. He threw on a cloak and headed out the door. Strolling down the street, sure enough, he didn't draw a single suspicious glance. Starting today, he was going to set aside an hour every single day to peep. To carefully observe his new neighbor. As the old saying goes, know yourself, know your enemy, and you shall. Wait, what the heck is this? A little chick? The chick noticed a stranger standing there. It immediately started chirping nonstop. The king, terrified of being caught, grabbed the little chick and pinched its beak shut tight. But this exact moment was spotted by Mary. A creepy old guy abusing a chick? Yeah, this was definitely not part of the king's plan. Just as he was racking his brain trying to figure out what to do, Mary spoke up first, saying the chick was a native resident here. It's not a foreign spy. Let it go right now. The king had absolutely no idea what she was talking about, but he still put the chick down on the ground. Then, in his head, he went through 800 different ways to handle this situation, but he vetoed every single one of them. Just then, Mary continued, I already know who you are. You're His Majesty the King's. The king was startled and quickly denied it, saying, No, I'm not. Secret inspector, right? Mary finished her sentence. The king was momentarily speechless. But hey, this worked out fine. At least his true identity hadn't been blown. Afraid of giving himself away, the king was just about to slip away. But Mary shouted out, asking what his name was. She even threatened, if you don't tell me, I'm going to tell everyone else that a creep broke into the farm today. The king thought, no way. If they find out it was me, where would I hide my face? So, he just blurted out a random name. Valentine. Mary earnestly jotted it down in her little notebook. She said it was a habit she'd had since she was a kid. She would always write down the names of people with high status. Then, with a sharp snap, Mary closed the notebook, and angrily told the king to open his eyes wide and take a good look. Was there really anything he was looking for on this farm? The king was completely baffled. What on earth was she talking about? Whatever, he just casually played along and said, yes. Now it was Mary's turn to be confused. You said yes? Do you see any forbidden plants around here? These are all completely normal household vegetables and herbs. Faced with Mary's death stare, the king finally realized he had totally misunderstood her. Mary took one look at his expression and knew. He didn't know the first thing about identifying crops. Wow, that king sure is a calculating guy. Purposely sending someone who knows nothing, just so he can catch me slipping up. What a vicious mind. Fine, you just go back and report to your king that we're researching how to commit treason here. The king was absolutely speechless. He simply said he wasn't the kind of person who tells lies. Mary blinked her big eyes at him. Didn't expect this guy to be so honest, she thought, suddenly feeling a tiny bit guilty. I was too harsh. I apologize. She then warmly invited the king into the house. The king, not even knowing why, just absent-mindedly followed her inside. Appreciating the thought, he was just about to turn and leave, but Mary suddenly leaned in to examine his necklace. She pointed at it and asked, what is this? The king replied, this was a gift from an elder sage I met a long time ago. But even now, I haven't been able to figure out its secret. I even named it the Philosopher's Stone. But Mary frowned. That's not right. This is clearly a seed. How do you know it's a seed? Isn't it obvious? Just like anyone can tell a human, a dog, and a cat apart at a glance, I can tell right away that this is a seed. It looks really peculiar though, so I don't know exactly what kind of seed it is. But since a sage gave it to you, it must be some incredibly mysterious plant. We definitely need to plant it. The secret is probably hidden inside the plant that grows from it. The king started to hesitate. Because honestly, this sounded completely absurd. But, what if it really could sprout? After getting back, the king immediately went to the lab, pulled out the necklace, and asked, is this a seed? The guy looked at it and thought, oh crap, the king is testing me. Well, that depends on what your majesty wants it to be. If your majesty says it's not, then it isn't a seed. The king got a bit annoyed. What kind of nonsense are you babbling about? I am asking you, scientifically speaking, is it possible that this is a seed? The man was taken aback for a second. Oh, an academic perspective. You should have said so earlier. Because, well, it's actually classified as a mineral. So the Philosopher's Stone is definitely not a seed. What I mean is, but what if? What if it was never the Philosopher's Stone to begin with? What if it's actually a seed? Well, then it would be a seed, because a seed is naturally a seed. The king rolled his eyes. Wasn't it just a load of absolute nonsense? Guards, drag this idiot out and chop his head off. After that, the king summoned a biologist. The biologist examined it from every possible angle. But no matter how he looked at it, it just didn't look like a seed. The king made a suggestion. Why don't you try planting it in some soil? If it really is a seed, it should sprout before long, right? The biologist planted it in a flower pot. But just as he picked it up to move it into the sunlight, crash, the bottom of the pot unexpectedly fell right out. When Mary heard about this, she was genuinely surprised. She insisted that it should actually be planted in water. Judging from the seed's outer appearance, this must be some kind of lotus. Saying that, she tried to drag the king inside the house. But the king snatched his hand away. I'm not a 3-year-old child, you know. I can walk perfectly fine on my own. Mary was left completely dumbfounded. Once inside the room, she sneakily dug out a hammer. And while the king wasn't paying attention, she raised it high. Wham! She smashed the hammer right down onto the seed. The king was absolutely terrified. But Mary just shrugged her little shoulders. Hey, I had no choice. This seed is just way too old. Its outer shell is so incredibly hard, I had to crack it open to let it breathe. The king was absolutely speechless. He had truly lived to see it all. That was the first time he'd ever heard such an outrageous theory. Standing there in front of Mary, he felt like a complete idiot. Once Mary finally finished prepping the seed, she found a wash basin and dropped it right in, carefully checking on its condition. Oh, it's actually doing pretty well, she noted. Suddenly, a thought struck the king. His subordinates were constantly coming and going around this farm. What if they ended up seeing the seed? Wouldn't his whole cover be blown? At that thought, he immediately shot up and yelled, Miss Mary. Mary nearly jumped out of her skin. Geez, what on earth are you screaming for? The king frantically asked. Has it sprouted yet? Mary just pouted her lips. How could it possibly be that fast? It'll take at least 2 or 3 days. Then, she carried something over and set it down on the table. Ta-da! Dinner is served. Freshly fried steak. Ah, so that's what she was sneaking around doing. She was actually just cooking. Mary looked at him. Why are you just standing there? Eat. Don't tell me you don't even know how to eat. But before the king could even get a word out, his stomach started protesting loudly. Grumble, grumble. It just wouldn't stop. And Mary definitely heard it too. The king was absolutely mortified. He muttered, I have some business to attend to, then spun around and bolted. Leaving poor Mary all alone and feeling a little hurt. Why did he just leave? Does my fried steak really smell that bad? Well, I guess I'll just have to force myself to eat both portions, she sighed. But surprisingly, the very next second, the king burst right back in. Listen, he said breathlessly, I can't come here every single day to check on this seed. If it sprouts, put a mark on the roof. Like, stick a flag up there, or something. And one more thing, I want this to stay a strict secret between the two of us. Although Mary had no idea what his deal was, she respected his wishes and happily agreed. Back in his luxurious palace, the king couldn't stop thinking about Mary's simple, yet mouth-watering fried steak. He instantly ordered his servants to tell the head chef that he wanted fried steak. Meanwhile, over in the royal kitchens, things were already chaotic. The head chef delicately shucked a fresh oyster, lightly drizzling it with a touch of lemon juice. He was just hoping His Majesty would appreciate this heavenly delicacy. But right at that moment, the royal butler hurried over to announce that the king demanded fried steak. The chef had no idea what kind of crazy mood His Majesty was in. But, of course, the head chef obeyed. He selected the most tender cuts of beef and carefully marinated them for exactly 81 minutes. Once perfectly fried, he plated it beautifully over grilled scampi, and finally, drizzled it with a special sauce crafted from 30 different ingredients. Head chef Alfonso was absolutely brimming with confidence about this dish. But after taking just one bite, the king told him not to make it so flashy next time. Just a simple, ordinary fried steak would do. This completely sent the head chef into deep thought. This is definitely His Majesty testing my loyalty. I heard his subordinates all turned against him. Just because of some delicious farm food, so his mood must be absolutely terrible right now. I absolutely cannot just take his words at face value. I, Sefi Validin, will forever be His Majesty's most loyal servant. The very next day, Mary discovered that the seed had sprouted. That was way faster than she imagined. She grabbed her quilts and spread them all over the roof, thinking to herself, this should be eye-catching enough, right? After doing all that, her stomach started growling. She made up her mind that today, she absolutely had to make Mr. Valentine stay and taste her cooking. She figured he'd arrive right around the time the food was ready, but the moment she turned around, the king was already standing right behind her. Mary couldn't help but suspect this guy had been staring at her roof the entire time. The king totally wanted to say, you guessed it. Mary then brought out the wash basin. The king was thrilled. It really was a seed. Mary noted that it looked a little withered, wondering if it had been kept for too long, or if it just wasn't used to the local soil and water. At this rate, it's gonna be really hard for the seed to survive, she said. Suddenly, the king had an idea. Why not just use growth magic to force it to sprout? Mary thought that sounded way too extravagant. Because using magic long-term disrupts the balance of nature, over in Britannia. Using magic requires paying insanely high taxes. Wow, Mr. Valentine must be extremely rich. She thought. The king felt a bit awkward. Since he was the king, he obviously didn't have to pay any magic taxes. He told her he'd prepare the growth magic for tomorrow, along with all the reference materials on aquatic plants. Mary gave a huge thumbs up to the rich guy. Right then, she suddenly remembered her cooking pot. She told the king to wait just a second, the fried steak would be ready soon. The mere mention of fried steak made the king blush, and by the time Mary finished frying it, he had already vanished without a trace. This drove her absolutely crazy. Why did he leave again? I've already eaten freaking fried steak for 7 meals in a row. She fiercely stabbed a piece with her fork, secretly swearing that next time, she would definitely make him eat it. The next day, after both were fully prepared, the king took out the growth magic and tore it open over the seed. With a splash in the water, the seed bloomed into a gorgeous lotus flower. It was Mary's first time seeing this kind of lotus, too. The king immediately started flipping through the reference books. When he found it, both of them were completely shocked. It turned out to be a highly toxic plant. Legend says that a hero king and his subordinates once drifted to a certain island, where the local tribe fed them a weird fruit. Anyone who ate it completely lost all their past memories. And from then on, all they cared about was lying around eating fruit all day, wanting to stay on that island forever. In the end, the hero king had to forcibly tie his men to the ship just to escape the island. It turns out those locals weren't wise sages at all, but demons preying on travelers. Hearing her say this, the king suddenly remembered that when he was on that island, they did actually offer him food too. But they looked so unbelievably poor that he just didn't eat it. Mary took another close look and noticed that this flower actually looked a bit different from the one in the book. so she asked the king what exactly happened on that island. The king casually replied, "Oh, nothing much, really. I just saw them meditating under the scorching sun and thought it was too hot, so I built them a sunshade. Not only that, but I also fixed up their huts that were blown down by a storm, and since their well looked way too dirty, I went ahead and dug them a brand new one." Mary couldn't believe that even while stranded himself, he still managed to do so much for them. The king just shrugged, saying he didn't want to waste time while repairing his ship. Plus, everything was such a disorganized mess, it was honestly just a massive eyesore. Mary seemed to realize something. She grabbed 4 spoons and laid them out completely crookedly right in front of him. Then told him to just quietly stare at them. Sure enough, after just a little while, the king absolutely couldn't stand it. He arranged the 4 spoons perfectly in a row. Mary teased that he was definitely a neat freak. But the king replied, "Doesn't everyone do this?" Mary just shook her head. The people on the island back then must have thought you were crazy. Everyone else was so lazy, but you were working your fingers to the bone. So, giving you these seeds meant that they hoped, while you were planting this flower, you'd forget all those trivial worries and just enjoy some free time. The king mentioned that recently, someone else had also told him to take a breather when he had nothing to do, and just relax a bit. That's exactly why I wanted to recommend the farm to someone like you. You can come over for a coffee when you're free. Watch the seeds on the farm sprout and grow, and just completely clear your mind. But that wasn't actually what she really wanted to recommend to the king. She told him to sit tight and be good while you waited for her to come back. Soon, Mary poured a glass of wine and urged him to try it, saying it was the night's wine. The king had sworn he wouldn't eat a single thing from here, but wine shouldn't count as food, right? He decided to just take a tiny sip. But the very next second, the king felt as if he was standing right in the middle of a golden dusk. Mary smiled. "You felt it too, didn't you?" Usually, grapes are harvested in October. But sometimes people deliberately leave a portion behind. They won't even pick them when the frost sets in. By holding out until the very end, the flavor of those grapes becomes incredibly rich and deep. That's why this is called the night's wine. Just like an old knight holding his ground on the battlefield until the very end. The king really loved that name. Seeing how much he was enjoying the drink, Mary asked if he wanted some snacks to go with his wine. Well, after a few sips, the king had completely thrown his earlier oath right out the window. Mary told him to just name whatever he was craving. Feeling a little tipsy, the king didn't hold back anymore. He had been craving that authentic, deep-fried steak for ages. He forked a piece and popped it into his mouth. The meat was incredibly tender, yet perfectly crispy on the outside. This was exactly what he had been dying to eat. The king couldn't help but think about the fried steak his own royal chef made. What the heck was that garbage anyway? Back at the palace, his chef would be crying, "Your Majesty, doesn't your conscience hurt saying that?" Mary then brought out 2 meat skewers. He picked one up and took a big bite. Wow, this is amazing too. In no time at all, an entire skewer was completely polished off. But wait, why did this skewer stick look so familiar? Don't tell me, is this the arrow I shot at her back in episode 2? The king shook his head. He must have had too much to drink. Just then, Mary mentioned that she'd be planting some grapes soon too. She planned to bulldoze the entire area next door and carve out a massive vineyard. The king was absolutely shell-shocked. Good heavens, she was talking about bulldozing his entire royal palace. If you do that, how are we supposed to hang out and have fun? He stood up and was ready to storm off. Mary quickly stopped him. "Aren't you going to take this flower with you?" The king thought to himself, "No way. If I take this back to the palace, it'll probably end up on the front page of tomorrow's newspaper. And when Mary sees the news, my cover will be totally blown." So, he quickly declared that he was donating the flower to the farm. Mary cried out in panic, "No, that won't work either. If the king finds out I'm growing monster plants on the farm, he'll definitely kick me out." Hearing this, the king felt a little bit awkward. "Just say you dug it up from the ground," he suggested. "Report it to the royal household department and you'll be absolutely fine. But there's one more favor I need to ask of you." Mary already knew exactly what he was going to say. "It'll be our little secret. Besides, thanks to you, I got to keep a super rare flower." The king suddenly sighed, thinking what an incredibly weird place this was. But wait, why did he even come here in the first place? He definitely got tempted by the food again. He really shouldn't come back here anymore. But honestly, nobody could resist the food here. Later, 3 uninvited guests showed up at the farm. The moment they arrived, they sneered, "What kind of trashy farm is this? Why does it smell so awful?" But Mary, being completely oblivious, didn't catch the insult at all. She cheerfully explained that she was just spreading fertilizer. She even dragged a bucket over and asked if they wanted to take a sniff, scaring 2 of them so badly they ran for their lives. Seeing that those 2 deadbeats were absolutely no help at all, Katie turned to Mary and asked if she had ever made rubatory. Mary had never even heard of the thing. She figured it was some kind of sushi or something. Seeing that she was completely clueless, Katie asked if Mary could whip some up in the next few days. Mary actually thought she had guessed right. And when it came to making food, oh, that was an absolute piece of cake for her. Realizing she took the bait, Katie immediately gathered everyone around. She announced that Miss Mary would be hosting a rouviterie very soon. Hearing the word hosting, Mary suddenly realized they definitely weren't talking about sushi. Katie smirked and said, "Of course not. Rouviterie means an afternoon tea party, you know. You absolute country bumpkin." Mary finally realized she'd been completely played. But right now, what worried her even more was the thought of nobody showing up. How embarrassing would that be? Lewis told her not to worry about it, explaining that there's a group of high society ladies in the palace with official titles. Even the king himself has to treat them with the utmost respect. Mary suddenly remembered. A few days ago, a couple of elegant white deer ladies really had stopped by. Lewis went on to say that while they definitely attend the tea party, they had incredibly picky palates and expected nothing but the most luxurious treats. But she had total faith in Mary's cooking skills, guaranteeing that once those ladies took a single bite, they'd be absolutely hooked. Just then, Laurent happened to be passing by the farm and popped in to see if they needed any help. Mary, meanwhile, had already come up with a theme for the tea party and wanted to run it by them for some advice. She was going to use golden cream to whip up all sorts of different flavored pastries, like pies, cookies, mini cakes, and croissants. Both of them thought it was an absolutely fantastic idea. It wouldn't just highlight the farm's unique charm, it would also feel super warm and welcoming. There was just one little problem: the farm was completely out of milk. On top of that, high-quality milk in the capital was ridiculously expensive. Lewis suggested that she could just apply for some sponsorship funding from the palace. All she needed was the approval of the Archduke's daughter. And as it turned out, Lady Athena, the Archduke's daughter, was also the king's cousin. Ever since a chance encounter in the woods when they were kids, she had harbored a secret, burning crush on him. The king, however, didn't really seem to care for her at all. But honestly, his coldness just made her cousin seem even more irresistibly charming to her. Unable to even look directly at his handsome face, Athena turned her head away and shyly handed the documents over to the king. The king opened the folder, wondering what the heck this was. A budget approval request for a palace afternoon tea party? Athena suddenly realized she'd handed him the wrong paperwork. Flustered, she explained that the farm was throwing an afternoon tea party this Saturday. "Everything looked perfectly fine to me, so I went ahead and approved it," she said. The king didn't even have to think twice. He knew damn well this wasn't Mary's idea. Some other noble ladies must have pressured her into hosting it, and their obvious goal was to humiliate her on purpose. He then told Athena she could leave. Athena completely froze. Wait, shouldn't His Majesty scold me for handing him the wrong file? She thought. Since when did his temper get so mild? After Athena left, the king just couldn't focus on his work anymore. An afternoon tea party? Well, Mary's cooking was definitely going to be famous around the palace now. Why am I even wasting time thinking about this? He muttered. What do I care if she gets famous or not? To snap himself out of his wild thoughts, the king decided to go shoot some arrows to relax. But as luck would have it, he overheard someone talking about Mary's farm. Now, the king really didn't mean to eavesdrop, but suddenly, a third voice chimed in. That so-called afternoon tea party of hers? Yeah, there is absolutely no way it's going as planned. Hearing this, the king immediately knew something shady was going on. He wanted to step out and see exactly who had just been running their mouth. But by the time he slipped around the hedges, the gossips were already long gone. So, he quietly waited until the staff from the Imperial Household Department finished their shift, determined to find out exactly who pushed for this palace tea party in the first place. The person he questioned actually thought the king was trying to target Mary. They practically begged the king to drop it, saying, "Please reconsider, this behavior is beneath your majesty's dignity." Worried about causing a scene, the king awkwardly left. He couldn't shake his curiosity. What in the world was their plan to sabotage the afternoon tea party? Unfortunately, someone passing by overheard him mumbling that, and totally misunderstood, thinking the king himself wanted to ruin the tea party. But she couldn't care less about what the king wanted. Grabbing a heavy bag of gold coins, she marched right over and handed it straight to Mary. Mary was absolutely thrilled. 10 whole gold coins. What a fortune. The messenger said it was royal funding, and she had to spend every last penny on the afternoon tea party. Mary was so excited, she immediately invited them to come along to the party too. But they gave a vague answer. Mary could only sigh, thinking, royalty will be royalty. Always so picky and utterly unpredictable. Over the next few days, Mary didn't just have to tend to the crops on the farm, she also had to prepare tea and snacks for about 30 people. Doing all of that alone was no easy task, but thankfully, she had a great group of friends by her side. Laurent helped her design the invitations, and Louis sorted out the milk supply. Siegfried pitched in by setting up the prep area and the storage room. And finally, Cayenne. He found Mary a designated taste tester. Cayenne mentioned that her father was a super famous pastry chef. Basically a household name back where they're from. Mary brought out all the food that needed testing. Worth took a bite and mumbled, I can't quite tell. I might need another taste. 4 or 5 plates later, she still couldn't give a proper verdict. This drove Louis absolutely crazy. Just how much more are you gonna eat? The more the better, obviously. This is unbelievably delicious, Worth replied. Cayenne just stood there with an I knew this would happen look on his face. Seeing this, Mary knew her recipes were a massive hit. Now, it was time for mass production. After a grueling day of non-stop work, Mary finally finished all the preparations. She stretched her sore muscles, dragged herself back to her room, and collapsed onto her bed. All that was left was for everyone to show up to the tea party tomorrow. But of course, somebody out there didn't want things to go so smoothly. Meanwhile, the king stood on his balcony, gazing out at the little cottage on the farm. Even though the prep work had gone off without a hitch over the past few days, he just couldn't shake this bad feeling. Suddenly, it clicked. He remembered hearing the Minister of the Interior mention that afternoon that some noble ladies were having an overnight prayer vigil at the Great Temple. He had a hunch that the trouble wouldn't happen tomorrow, but tonight. After throwing on a disguise, he rushed over to the Great Temple to check. And his suspicions were spot on. At that exact moment, Katie's little trio had snuck into the farm's food storage area. Without a second thought, Katie snatched up a tray of bread, ready to smash it on the floor. But when she turned around, she was completely stunned. What the heck are you doing? She demanded angrily. Whitey mumbled back, I was just smelling it. Bullcrap, I literally saw you open your mouth. Well, it's not my fault. This bread just smells too freaking good. Pinky started scolding her too. And just because of that, you're going to eat this. This disgusting, fattening bread? But the bread from this farm is seriously amazing. Just look at it. I don't know what kind of cream they used, but it looks like it would just melt in your mouth. If that frosting is made with heavy cream, the taste must be absolutely out of this world. Katie and Pinky were both utterly flabbergasted. Whitey continued, do you really think smashing all this bread on the floor will stop tomorrow's tea party? Yeah, obviously. But right then, Pinky caught a whiff of that irresistible creamy scent too. The farm owner would probably just find a way to whip up a fresh batch and fix everything. Whitey argued, exactly. So what we should do is, we should destroy the evidence by eating every last crumb. Katie stared at them, convinced they had both completely lost their minds. Seeing them about to dig in, Katie snapped, aren't you going to regret this later? But her words fell on deaf ears. The two of them grabbed the bread and started furiously stuffing their faces. They were literally crying while they chewed. Oh my god, it's so good. It's been ages since I tasted fresh cream. Me too. I've been surviving on nothing but a tiny bit of greens every day. Katie watched the binge-eating duo in horror. They were definitely insane. Ever since she was little, her mother had drilled it into her head to manage her figure. A woman must maintain her beauty at all times, she reminded herself desperately. I can't eat it. I absolutely cannot eat it. Before long, the gorging duo had polished off every single piece of bread. Katie just shot them a furious glare. You two are absolutely out of your minds. Your corsets are so stretched they won't even button up. You'll regret this sooner or later. Just then, a voice came from behind them. What are you doing? The three of them snapped their heads around. A man? At that moment, Mary also heard the commotion and woke up. Katie threw together a completely ridiculous excuse, claiming her pet ferret had suddenly escaped. And sprinted right into that shed, knocking over absolutely everything inside. My butler will come by tomorrow to pay for your damages. After dropping that line, she bolted out of there like lightning. Mary still had no clue what was going on, until the king filled her in. That's when she realized that every single dessert she had prepared had been devoured by them. That was literally enough food for 30 people. To scarf it all down in one sitting. You have to admit, they are hardcore. Thank goodness, there was still one plate of butter cookies left. At this point, the king was getting a bit anxious. He wasn't worried about Mary's tea party tomorrow, but rather his own reputation. Because he and Mary already had beef with each other. If everyone found out about this mess, they would definitely pin the blame on him. Wouldn't his lifelong, flawless reputation be completely ruined? Just thinking about it gave him chills. But Mary casually figured, if the desserts are eaten, then they're eaten. As long as they weren't thrown on the dirt and wasted, it was fine. Otherwise, she would have chased them down on horseback and dragged them right back to the farm. The fact that they licked the plates clean just proves that her cooking skills are absolutely top tier. The only letdown was that she didn't get to see them eat it with her own eyes. But what was she going to do about tomorrow's afternoon tea party? Since they went to such pathetic lengths to sabotage the tea party, there was absolutely no way she was going to back down now. Pulling off an epic, against all odds comeback is the most badass kind of revenge. Soon enough, Mary hatched a brand new plan. The king offered to help her gather new ingredients, but Mary just asked him to find her around 30 wine bottles. As she said that, Mary tried to hand him cash for the bottles. The king just dropped a quick no need. And whoosh, he vanished into thin air. Mary couldn't help but wonder just how rich this guy really was. To turn down free money like that. Meanwhile, the king couldn't even be bothered to explain himself to the guards. He hopped on his lil Mustang, smoothly vaulted over the wall, and went door to door buying up bottles while flashing his royal badge. He had to hustle through 7 or 8 houses in a row before he finally scraped together enough of them. Tease, it's been ages since I did this kind of heavy lifting. Right now, he was hot, exhausted, and starving. If he could just get a bite of piping hot food right about now, that would be pure heaven. When he got back to the farm and pushed the door open, his eyes instantly lit up. Mary smiled. You came back at the absolute perfect time. I just finished making some cream stew. The king thought to himself, wait, can she read minds or something? He immediately rushed over to wash his little hands. The moment he sat down, Mary brought out a plate of fresh bread. The king grabbed a piece, dunked it right into the stew for exactly 3 seconds, and took a massive bite. How on earth could anything taste this insanely good? Not too salty, not too sweet, it was absolutely perfect. A whole day's worth of exhaustion just washed away in a flash. Suddenly, the king noticed that Mary had changed her clothes. Was she already getting dressed up for tomorrow's tea party? The king was super curious to see exactly what she was plotting. The very next day, while the king was busy handling state affairs, he suddenly heard the buzzing chatter outside about the tea party. He completely lost all focus for work, ditched his 2 ministers, and bolted right out the door. He threw on a quick change of clothes and stealthily slipped back to the farm. Meanwhile, on the other side, seeing that the vibe of the tea party was just right, Mary dramatically whipped the white tablecloth off the table with a swoosh. She told everyone to step up and grab a bottle for themselves. Seeing this, the crowd was totally baffled. We came here to be served. Are you seriously telling us to serve ourselves? Don't tell me these glass bottles are supposed to be today's dessert? Even the king didn't see this coming. She literally just slammed all the bottles down in front of them. If things kept going like this, the tea party was destined to be a total train wreck. Sure enough, Aston immediately stepped up. I hold the prestigious title of head maid to the Grand Duchess's entourage. You invite me to an afternoon tea party and expect me to pour my own water? I have never been subjected to such an insult in my entire life. The crowd started buzzing with whispers, and Mary felt just a tiny bit nervous. If Grand Duchess Libby said she was thirsty, you'd definitely pour water for her yourself, wouldn't you? How could that be the same? How is it any different? Aston decided to teach Mary a good lesson. For us, being able to personally serve someone of noble status is not a chore, but a privilege. Even the daughter of Grand Duke Apache feels the same. If she met Her Majesty the Empress Dowager, she would push everyone else aside just to personally attend to her. Mary asked, then, in that very moment, you all must feel incredibly happy, right? Aston firmly replied, of course we do. Well, then I'm even more curious, Mary said. Since you all understand this so perfectly well, then why, when facing the most precious person in the world, do you do absolutely nothing? Aston replied, of course we also take care of our husbands and children. Mary smiled, oh, I'm not talking about them. I mean, it's ourselves, of course. You are all truly outstanding women. Not only do you assist the royal family in the palace, but when you go home, you're busy taking care of your families. Yet every single time you do things with your own hands, it's always to serve others. It's never for yourselves. When I was very little and saw a farm for the first time, it just felt so full of magic and happiness. I always dreamed that one day, I'd have a farm of my very own. And then, just like Aunt Martha, I could make everyone who visits the farm feel incredibly happy. That's why I named my farm, Maronier, as a symbol of Belmont. So, would all of you be willing, here on this farm today, to brew a batch of authentic, rustic dandelion wine, as a beautiful gift for the most precious person in the world, yourselves? Millen had attended all sorts of parties before, but she always found them completely unremarkable. She didn't have a single expectation. Honestly, today she had planned that no matter how delicious Mary's desserts were, or how perfectly she brewed the tea, her review would just be mediocre. That is, until Mary said those words. Personally make a gift for yourself. It took her completely by surprise. Mary was absolutely right. Even though she would always show off her skills for others, she had never actually done anything for herself. And this time, it was a gift meant just for her. Everyone eagerly scrambled, dying to try it out. Mary happily brought out some paper and pens, and had everyone write down their names. Then, she divided them into groups of 5 and started teaching them how to make the wine. First, prepare a wooden box and lay a piece of cloth right over it. Next, put the freshly picked flowers inside, wash them thoroughly, and squeeze out all the water nice and tight. After that, use hot water to completely dissolve the sugar, and pour it right over the flower petals. Now, we need to scoop out the pulp from the lemons and oranges, and stir them into the mixture. Finally, we add the wine yeast. Oh, and if you like raisins, feel free to toss some in too. Then just use a funnel to pour it into the bottles, and you're all done. The dandelion wine needs to sit for 6 weeks before it's ready to drink. Not only does it taste amazing, but it's also great for your heart and digestion. Plus, 6 weeks from now, it'll be summer, so chilling it on ice before having a glass will be absolutely perfect. Thud, out of nowhere, Mary hauled over a massive wooden barrel, cheerfully calling everyone to come taste her fruit and vegetable mint tea and butter cookies. The ladies each picked up a cookie and took a bite. Instantly, their eyes lit up. It was seriously so delicious. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the tea party to wrap up. Everyone sighed, amazed at how fast the time had flown by. They all warmly said their goodbyes to Mary. Millen had only just left the party, when someone blocked her path and asked, well, was it just as boring as it always is? Millen tightened her grip on her bottle of wine. No, this was actually the best party I have ever been to. The king had assumed everything wrapped up smoothly. But suddenly, someone yelled out, over here. She's hiding right here. The king whipped his head around, only to realize they weren't talking about him. It was Katie's trio, hiding off to the side, who had just been busted by Voss. The king thought to himself, you'd better not let them off the hook too easily. He was just about to sneak a little closer to eavesdrop on their conversation. Suddenly, an old man popped out from the bushes. I knew it was you, your majesty. Another old man chimed in from up in a tree. To think you'd actually hide yourself away, and even wear a disguise. The king cursed under his breath. Damn it, now I'm gonna miss the good part. Meanwhile, after Mary caught Katie's trio red-handed, she yelled at them, demanding to know if they had any idea just how shameful their actions were. Red burst into tears, wailing that she'd stuffed her face with so much of her food like a total pig. I'm definitely gonna turn into a giant butterball, she cried, but Mary shook her head. That's not the problem here. Your mistake was sneaking in here without the owner's permission and gobbling up absolutely everything. Food shouldn't be treated like that. You're supposed to sit down with the host and actually talk about the meal. And then take your time enjoying it in a cheerful mood. You're even supposed to share your thoughts on how it tastes. Katie, however, was out of patience. I'll have my butler compensate you for whatever damages we caused. Mary's face darkened instantly. Compensate? I spent 2 whole days cranking that massive mixer by hand to make that cream. You can't just put a price tag on that kind of effort. But, you can pay me back with manual labor. Seeing the girls balk at the idea, Mary laid down the law. I am the master of this farm, and here, my word is absolute law. The minister of the imperial household told me that himself. So, the second you stepped foot on my land, you should have watched your step. Katie still thought this was taking things way too far, but Worth had heard enough. So, do you want me to make this whole little incident public, or? Mary wanted to handle it herself and told Worth not to get violent. But just the threat of violence made the trio instantly fall into line. Mary ordered Red to fill up a huge bucket with water. Red tried to play weak, pretending she couldn't lift it. But when she actually heaved it up, she realized she was as steady as a rock. Mary stood right behind her, cheering her on at the top of her lungs. Meanwhile, Katie was terrified of being recognized, just wanting to finish the chores and get the hell out of there. White, on the other hand, was surprisingly chill about it. Hey, plenty of nobles take up gardening as a hobby, she reasoned. By the time the sun started setting, the trio had finally finished all the farm chores. Mary walked over, carrying out a fresh tray of food, and Red and White stared at it, practically drooling all over the dirt. Mary smiled. I made this specially to thank you guys. The afternoon tea party went off without a hitch today, and it's all thanks to your hard work. Katie tried to stop her friends, but she was way too late. The two of them were already stuffing their faces. Oh my god, this is amazing. White screamed in delight. The bread is incredibly soft and delicious. And this tomato, it literally tastes like the magical essence of the earth. It pairs so perfectly with these light chunks of cheese. And wait, what is up with this lettuce? Just stuffing it into the bread and taking a massive bite, it's so good. It tastes like pure health. Later that day, Camber tracked Mary down. He came to convince her to enter the upcoming cooking competition. Since the farm wasn't exactly raking in any cash yet, if she really wanted to secure her place in the palace, Mary desperately needed to find another source of income. And as luck would have it, the grand prize for the cooking contest was a solid gold ring. The second Mary heard the words gold ring, she perked right up. She leaned in and whispered, are you sure it's pure gold? Camber chuckled, I guarantee it, 24 karat, pure gold. Hearing that, Mary was absolutely over the moon. Camber told her all she had to do was go see the head maid today to get registered. Mary quickly showered him with thanks. Having delivered the news, Cambert stood up to leave, but Mary suddenly called out, wait a second. Cambert paused, asking if there was anything else on her mind. Mary hesitated, then shook her head. Never mind, it's nothing. Cambert didn't press the issue and quietly took his leave. In truth, Mary really wanted to ask him about Valentine, but Valentine was always so dead set on keeping things a secret. She hadn't even gotten the chance to properly thank him for what happened last time. Then, a thought struck her. Maybe she'd actually bump into him at the palace today. Later that afternoon in the royal palace, the king was busy entertaining all sorts of guests as usual. As he walked past a window, he casually glanced outside. His eyes widened instantly, standing completely frozen on the spot. The attendant beside him was a bit puzzled. Why did he just stop? Is there someone over there? But when he turned back around, the king was already long gone. The poor attendant was panicking. They had specifically ordered him to keep a close eye on His Majesty. Meanwhile, the king had already dashed upstairs next door, hiding in the corner and secretly spying on Melly. Why isn't she just staying out at the farm? What is she doing at the palace? The king muttered to himself. His muttering was overheard by the head maid right behind him, and oh, she was absolutely furious. The last time she caught him talking to himself, he was plotting how to ruin someone's tea party. She kept her mouth shut back then, but catching him again today? Oh, this was the last straw. She loudly declared to the king that citizens had every right to freely enter the palace administrative offices. King just stood there stunned for 3 seconds. What did she mean by that? But it quickly clicked. I was literally just curious. That's the only reason I was talking to myself. Melly was right in the middle of chatting with someone when she suddenly heard Valentine's voice. She left the person she was talking to and walked straight over to where the king was. But when she turned the corner, she only saw the head maid. Melly asked where the knight who was just there had gone. The head maid pretended to have no idea. What knight? There's no knight here. Meanwhile, the king was hiding in the very next room. He thought to himself, how is this little girl's hearing so sharp? Was she a giant-eared rabbit in her past life or something? The head maid asked her, is someone bullying you? Because if they are, I'll gladly teach them a lesson right now. Melly quickly said, oh, no, pardon my intrusion. And with that, she said goodbye to the head maid. Hiding in the room, the king let out a massive sigh of relief. But he was dying to know, why did Melly suddenly come to the palace? So, he sneakily followed right behind her. Melly made her way over to the registration desk for the cooking competition. She saw that everyone had already arrived early and lined up. Just then, Duchess Winter arrived. Everyone immediately bowed to her, and Melly bent down to give a perfect, proper curtsy. Winter looked through everyone's application forms. Surprisingly, Melly had written the gold ring as her reason for entering. Melly explained she honestly didn't have time to think of a better excuse. Winter just chuckled. You really are quite unique. Well, it's just a formality anyway, so it doesn't matter. However, this competition is a side event for the upcoming ball. Which means, His Majesty the King will also be attending the ball. Melly was completely caught off guard. She hadn't expected the king to be there. She hadn't just snatched up his land, she had done it in a way that left him totally unable to find fault with it. Bumping into the king at the ball would be unbelievably awkward. What if he just kicked her out right then and there? But then again, she hadn't done anything wrong. She couldn't just give up on the gold ring over something like this. Winter told her, honestly, His Majesty won't stay at the ball for very long. And he definitely won't care about what's happening in the corners of the room. I just want you to do a fantastic job as a contestant, so I just thought I'd casually mention it. But just in case, I do need to ask one more thing. You do have a formal evening gown, right? Melly froze. Wait, do I seriously need to wear a fancy gown just to cook? Winter explained that formal attire was absolutely required for the event. I know it sounds totally old-fashioned, but that's just how high society works. If you don't show up to the ball in a proper gown, no one is going to take you seriously or even listen to a word you say. That felt like a massive slap in the face to Melly. The whole reason she was here to win money was because she was completely broke. And now she had to spend a fortune right off the bat? Winter saw how genuine she was, so she just gave it to her straight. Without a proper gown, you'll never make a dime in high society circles. You should really just bite the bullet and invest in one. If you don't know much about dresses, just ask some friends who do. Let them help you pick something out. Melly felt completely defeated. She literally had zero money to buy an evening gown. What on earth am I going to do? She thought to herself as she started walking back. Suddenly, a tall, imposing figure stepped out in front of her, completely blocking her path. It scared the living daylights out of Melly. It wasn't until he spoke that she finally recognized the voice. It was Mr. Valentine. Melly's heart instantly soared with joy. Oh, thank goodness. For a second there, I really thought I was hearing things. You probably didn't know, but my afternoon tea party was a huge success. Not wanting to expose the fact that he'd been secretly watching, the king had to play dumb and pretend he knew absolutely nothing. Mary said, thanks to your wine bottles, I was able to make something incredibly special. The king rubbed his chin, pretending to think. What could it be? Something you can store in a bottle. Could it be some kind of gummy candy? Mary giggled. Nope, it's dandelion wine. If you'd like a taste, I'll bring you a bottle next time. Besides, we'll be seeing each other in the palace soon anyway. The king's eyes widened in sheer panic. Had his cover been blown already? He quickly asked her why. But Mary just leaned in and whispered, Mr. Valentine, do you happen to own a ball gown? The king was completely lost. Mary explained, don't they say that the fancy gowns cost as much as a whole carriage? I couldn't even dream of affording one. But you seem quite well off, Mr. Valentine. So, I was wondering, maybe you have a bunch of your grandmother's old dresses just sitting around in a storage room somewhere? If you do, I'd love to pay you a little something to just borrow one for a bit. Seeing the king still speechless, Mary thought she had overstepped her bounds. But to her surprise, the king finally spoke up. My grandmother's gowns are, in a museum. Only then did Mary realize he had actually been trying to figure out a way to help her. She smiled and said, there are two kinds of people in this world. The first kind listens to your troubles, and uses them as a weakness to look down on you. But then there's the second kind. They listen quietly, and then actually try to help you figure out a solution. I'm absolutely certain you're the second kind, Mr. Valentine. Like the other night, when you helped me find those glass bottles so late. I've been meaning to tell you. Thank you so much. Spilling her heart out like that made Mary feel like a bit of a fool. But she genuinely believed Valentine was a good man. He wasn't the type to just turn a blind eye to someone in need. Plus, he always looked so happy eating whatever she offered him. If only he could come visit the farm more often. At that moment, the king finally put two and two together. It wasn't that she specifically wanted to wear a grandmother's dress. It was because she was broke. She worked incredibly hard, yet still couldn't afford a gown for the ball. Should he really take the late Empress Dowager's sacred gowns out of the royal museum just for her to wear? The king furiously shook his head. What kind of ridiculous nonsense was he thinking? Do you need a gown because of the upcoming royal ball? He asked. When Mary nodded yes, the king fell deep into thought again. He was going to be the center of attention at this ball. No matter how utterly oblivious Mary could be, the second she saw his face, she'd instantly realize Valentine's true identity. And he absolutely did not want that to happen. Seeing him racking his brain so hard, Mary thought she'd offer him some freshly picked cherries to give him a little brain boost. But when she looked back up, the king had vanished into thin air. Well, missing out on cherries this good is entirely his loss. She shrugged. The second the king rushed back to the palace, he tracked down the officials in charge of planning the ball. They assumed the king was there to cancel the event again, and firmly declared, even if your majesty throws us all in the dungeon, you still cannot stop this ball. But the king just waved his hands. Relax, I'm just here to make a little suggestion. Suggestion? Absolutely not. No suggestions allowed. The king lost his temper. Would you just let me finish? The ball is fine, but there is one condition. It has to be a masquerade. The three officials stared at him, completely dumbfounded. Before storming out, the king turned around and emphasized it one last time. It must be a masquerade, or the whole thing is off. Once he was gone, the three immediately started gossiping. That is the very first time His Majesty has ever shown interest in a ball. Who knew he was into that sort of thing? But why the sudden change of heart? Isn't it obvious? It's definitely because of a woman. He's finally got a crush on someone. And for the first time in 22 years, no less. Meanwhile, Mary was busy wondering what Valentine was up to right at that moment. I really need to bake him a cherry pie next time, she thought. She really hoped he'd come visit the farm soon. But right now, the king was completely stressing out over her dress. He couldn't even figure out why he was agonizing over it. What did her dress have to do with him anyway? He made up his mind to just drop it, but the second he turned around, he thought of that sweet smile. And those big, bright emerald eyes. And then, without even realizing it, he was thinking about the dress again. The king was driving himself absolutely crazy. The worst part was, he didn't know the first thing about fashion. Whether it was fabrics, design, or the latest trends, it was a total blind spot for him. Suddenly, he thought of someone. Louie. The next day, he staged a totally casual run-in with Louie, telling her, you don't need to work overtime tomorrow afternoon. She had to double-check with the people around her just to believe it. That was so unlike his usual style. Was he secretly plotting some dirty trick? Oh, whatever. Tomorrow I can finally go visit Mary at the farm. Meanwhile, Mary was pulling her hair out over the menu for the cooking competition. She had no idea if her cooking would even suit their tastes. But the budget for fancy, extravagant dishes was just way too high. Suddenly, she heard a rustling sound in the bushes nearby. She looked down, and two heads popped out of nowhere. Mary nearly jumped out of her skin. She seriously thought she was seeing ghosts in broad daylight. The two old men were begging for help, crying about how starving they were. Mary quickly dragged them into the shade. She picked some fresh cherries for them, but they just kept whining that they were still starving. So, Mary had no choice but to hand over her entire vegetable basket. The two old guys looked like they were absolutely famished. They scrambled toward the basket, practically climbing over each other. Judging by their clothes, they definitely looked like nobles. She had no idea why they'd passed out in the bushes. One of the old men grabbed a handful of raw beans from the basket, popped a few into his mouth, and realized they were actually delicious. The other one panicked and yelled, quick, let me try some too. After one bite, he was hooked too. The more they chewed, the better it tasted. They kept popping them in one by one, completely unable to stop. Mary was completely baffled. Are they really that good? She thought. These are literally the most basic beans you can buy at the market. But suddenly, it clicked. These nobles were so used to eating rich, extravagant delicacies, that a fresh, simple, rustic country flavor actually felt completely novel and exciting to them. All she had to do was plan her menu around that exact idea. She threw a quick goodbye to the two old men, and practically sprinted off, absolutely thrilled. The two old guys didn't even get a chance to ask her name. Shortly after, they both completely agreed. Mary was obviously the goddess of the earth, disguised as a humble farm girl, sent specifically to save them from starvation. The two of them were just incredibly moved by the whole thing. Once back at the farm, Mary whipped up her new menu for the cooking competition in no time. And to reward herself, she decided to bake a massive, glorious cherry pie. She already had all the basic ingredients prepped. All she had to do was stuff it full of sweet cherry filling. Crimp the edges to give it a nice shape, and pop it right into the oven to bake. Soon enough, the perfect cherry pie was done. Looking at her delicious masterpiece, Mary's heart just exploded with happiness. The very next day, she headed to the palace and submitted her menu. But she was absolutely terrified they'd ask about her dress, so she dropped the menu and bolted right out of there. On her way back home, she was busy daydreaming, thinking about how, as soon as she finished her chores for the day, she was going to devour that cherry pie. But suddenly, she stopped dead in her tracks. Mary could have sworn she heard footsteps trailing behind her. She could even feel someone staring daggers at her back. This definitely wasn't just a coincidence. The feeling of being watched was way too real. Was this because of the cooking competition? If so, she had a lot more to worry about now than just her recipes. This time, she absolutely refused to let her food get ruined again. Meanwhile, Louis rushed straight to the farm the second she got off work. She called out for Mary a few times, but got zero response. She peeked through the window and realized Mary wasn't even home. Right then, she noticed a huge water bucket sitting beneath the windowsill. Inside the bucket was a really bizarre-looking flower. Looking closer, she realized it had actually been forced to bloom using growth magic. Plus, the magical aura felt a lot like the one her friend left behind. It didn't feel like Siegfried's or Cayenne's at all. Could it be Laurentine's? No, this feels much more like. Just as the name was on the tip of her tongue, a sudden wave of drowsiness hit her. Her eyelids grew heavier and heavier, and the next second, thud, she collapsed right next to the water bucket. Meanwhile, Melly had been pacing back and forth, searching high and low. She couldn't find her stalker anywhere, so she decided to just head back to the farm first. But when she got to the entrance, the gate was wide open. A sudden sense of dread washed over her. Could it be that stalker? She grabbed a shovel lying nearby and pressed herself against the corner of the house. She counted silently in her head. 1, 2, 3. On 3, she dashed out like an arrow. But to her shock, it was just Louis. Terrified that an intruder had knocked her out, Ellie dropped the shovel and sprinted over to her. But when she rolled her over, oh, she was just fast asleep. Melly was utterly baffled. Why'd I keep running into unconscious people lately? She muttered. After Louis woke up, Melly asked, didn't you have to work today? Louis wiped the drool from her chin. Huh, how did I fall asleep? It must be because of this lotus flower. It has a deeply calming and relaxing effect. Louis vaguely remembered that right before dozing off, she was thinking about something super important. But now, her memory was completely foggy. How on earth did I fall asleep at such a critical moment? It's a purebred flower, Melly noted. The effects shouldn't be that strong, honestly. You're probably just exhausted. Louis nodded. Yeah, you're right. I'm absolutely drained. But, that's not the point. The point is, I got to leave work early today. And it was a direct order from the Emperor himself. Melly raised an eyebrow. Is the Emperor really that nice? Could he be plotting something dangerous again today? Our esteemed Emperor has been a little too quiet lately. It's honestly making me a bit nervous. But whatever, even if the sky falls down, it won't stop my determination to farm. Louis quickly reassured her not to worry. She promised that the moment the Emperor made a move, she would let Melly know immediately. Besides, his mind is completely focused on the upcoming ball anyway. Melly smiled warmly. You're the best, Louis. So reliable. She grabbed her pruning shears and headed over to the cherry tomatoes. Louis trailed right behind her, eager to pitch in. Snip. Melly ruthlessly chopped off a tomato stem. Louis stared in confusion. She thought Melly was taking her anger out on the poor plants. Melly chuckled. This is called pruning. Lou's eyes lit up like a curious little kid. Melly patiently broke it down for her. The soil here is incredibly rich, so the tomatoes are growing like crazy. Now, normally, that's a good thing. But if the nutrients spread out too much, the fruits won't taste sweet at all. That's why you have to trim the excess branches early on. Hearing this, it suddenly clicked for Louis. Wow, that's exactly what Wise does. Melly blinked, having never heard that name before. Louis giggled, that's the Emperor. A long time ago, the late Emperor was a massive playboy. He was so easily blinded by other women. There was a time when he completely despised the Empress and Wise. He made their lives miserable. Both Wise and Her Majesty suffered terribly back then. Because of that, Wise swore from a young age that he would only ever give his affection to his future Empress. That's why he doesn't bat an eye at any other noble ladies. In fact, at formal events, he only ever associates with the Archduke's daughter, Lady Athena. The minister of the imperial household is practically pulling his hair out over it. Melly shook her head. Shouldn't he at least try dating someone for a while to see if there's a spark? How else is he going to know if she's the right person? Sounds to me like he's just completely iced over his own heart. Once the chores were done, Louis flopped down onto the soft grass, soaking in the gentle, relaxing breeze. She even started wondering if she should open a farm of her own. After all, Melly did just praise her natural talent for farming. Just then, Melly leaned out the window and called her name. Louis groaned inwardly, thinking it was time to spread manure or something. Melly said, "That's enough for today. I just wanted to invite you inside. I actually just baked a cherry pie a little while ago." Hearing there was food, Lou's eyes immediately lit up. Melly said, "I was just worrying about how I'd never be able to finish it all by myself. I didn't expect you to drop by at the perfect time." Louis sliced off a piece and gobbled the whole thing down in a single bite. This is exactly it. Over a base of crushed, crispy graham crackers is a thick layer of rich, homemade fresh cream straight from the farm, all topped off with beautifully sweet cherries. Cutting into a pie made with such high-quality cherries, and taking that first big bite. With every single chew, those perfectly sun-ripened cherries just burst with delicious juice right in your mouth. It was completely addictive. Melly then brought over a large bowl. "Here's some extra cream and cherries. It's a bit of a shame the cherries have gotten a little warm, though. I just couldn't fit any more onto the pie, so it couldn't be helped." Speaking of which, Louis also noticed that the kitchen was indeed missing a freezer. Hearing this, Melly looked a little sad. She definitely didn't have the money to buy a freezer right now. Cambert was right. This farm desperately needed funding. Thinking about this, Melly suddenly remembered something. "Lord Louis, do you have a grandmother?" Louis swallowed the food in her mouth. "Yeah, I do. Meaning, the previous vampire lord." Melly beamed with joy. Then, "Does your grandmother have a lot of formal dresses?" "Nope. Because of her personal taste, she only really has the black dresses she wears all the time." Melly immediately looked a bit deflated. "Why the sudden interest in my grandmother's dresses?" Melly explained that she was trying to raise operating funds for the farm, so she had decided to enter the cooking contest being held at the upcoming ball. But the basic requirement for the competition was that everyone had to wear a formal dress. And I definitely don't have the money to buy a new dress right now. So the Duchess told me to reach out to a close friend and ask for help. Hearing the word friend, Lou's cheeks flushed a light shade of pink. Before Melly could say another word, Louis shot up from her seat. "If it's a dress you need, you definitely came to the right person." But Melly just sighed. "If I wore one of your dresses, it would probably look like I'm wearing a giant potato sack, wouldn't it? Just come home with me first. Think of it as my way of repaying you for this amazing cherry pie. Leave the dress problem completely to me." A short while later, Melly was all dressed and waiting by the door for Louis, since Louis had to send a message back home first. But when Louis returned, Siegfried was right there with her. Melly hadn't expected Siegfried to tag along too. Siegfried explained that they had bumped into Louis on the way, and Louis had simply invited them to come along. Plus, Siegfried claimed to know quite a lot about dresses. Meanwhile, Louis was standing off to the side, absolutely fuming. "You're the one who shamelessly insisted on tagging along." But Melly was thrilled and thanked Louis once again. The three of them then headed off toward Lou's estate. When they arrived, the old butler was practically moved to tears. In the past, she would either bring home the knight commander or some completely wasted subordinates. But this time, she finally brought home a girl. The old butler suddenly felt like he could die happy. It was Melly's first time seeing an estate like this. It was absolutely massive and breathtakingly gorgeous. However, one thing really baffled her. How on earth did they manage to clean windows that high up? The trio then made their way to the dressing room, which was filled with all sorts of high heels. An endless array of sparkling jewelry, and more glamorous dresses than she could possibly count. Melly was completely stunned for a moment. Louis told her to pick whatever she wanted and not to be shy about it. Glancing through the racks, Melly realized there were dresses in absolutely every size. Louis explained that it was a personal hobby of hers. Whenever she saw a beautiful dress, she'd just buy it and keep it on hand, ready to gift to someone at a moment's notice. Suddenly, Melly noticed that there were even tiny, child-sized dresses. Oh, those are for acquaintances' daughters, nieces, or even little dogs. No wonder they're so tiny and cute. So, are all of these meant to be given away? Louis gasped at those words. Had her lavish spending actually disappointed Mary? Hearing this, Mary quickly waved her hands in denial. "Why would I be disappointed?" Mary said. "I think as long as you're happy, that's all that matters. Weren't you having the absolute best time picking out all these dresses?" Touched by her sweet words, Louis said, "Then you should pick out a few more. And you don't even have to give them back. To be honest, I haven't given a single one of these dresses away. If you'd be willing to accept them, it would make me so happy." Now, if there was one thing Mary loved, it was helping others. So, she smiled and happily agreed. "Honestly, I have to say, can I get a dozen friends like her too?" Louis eagerly urged Mary to go try them on, to see if they fit. And just like that, 3 maids instantly appeared right beside them. Mary was about to say she could handle it herself, but the maids insisted that putting on the dresses was quite complicated. "You can't possibly do it alone, miss," they said. "Please leave your hair and styling to us as well." Before long, Mary was all dressed up. They tried a pink gown, and then a yellow one. It was Mary's first time wearing a formal gown, so she felt a bit awkward. But Louis, she was bursting with excitement. "Oh my gosh, this yellow one looks absolutely stunning on you." Sigri, standing nearby, nodded repeatedly in agreement. Since you have that beautiful dark chestnut hair, this adorable tulle dress with the yellow bows is an absolute match made in heaven. Plus, you have such a lovely, fair complexion. You'd definitely look gorgeous in this turquoise silk, too. Mary glanced at the dress in Louis' hands. I think that one would actually look much better on you, she said. Hearing this, the three maids stepped up once again. Soon enough, Louis was all dressed up too. How'd I look? She asked, spinning around. Looking up at Louis, who was 30 centimeters taller than her, Mary couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. Wow, you look incredibly elegant. Hand in hand, the two of them giggled and went to try on more dresses. Watching them, Sigri smiled warmly. This was actually the very first time Louis had ever made a female friend. He had been so worried she might mess it up somehow. Clearly, he had been overthinking it. He and the old butler shared a knowing smile, and the old butler closed his eyes in pure relief. Once they were done trying on the dresses, the butler brought out a book. It described what the nobles wore to the royal balls. Although the information was a bit dated, thankfully, it wasn't too old. It was sure to be helpful for Mary. She carefully opened the book. The dress on the very first page was breathtakingly dazzling. Louis pointed out that it was the Empress Dowager's gown. You won't see her at the ball, though, she explained. She went through so many hardships in her youth that her health doesn't allow her to attend events like this anymore. But, if there's ever a chance, I'll sneak you in behind the Emperor's back to meet her. I just know she'd absolutely adore you. Louis spoke of the Empress Dowager with such deep affection and love, laced with profound respect. It seemed Her Majesty was undoubtedly a wonderful person. Mary continued flipping through the pages. The very next outfit was the uniform the Emperor wore in disguise. Louis explained that it was the uniform of the Royal Knights. This is an older design, though, Louis said. Seeing it actually reminds me of Mr. Randolph. He's an incredibly skilled knight, and one of the Empress Dowager's most trusted confidants. Mary was shocked. He served the Empress Dowager? She immediately asked if all the knights in the book, weren't they all the Emperor's direct subordinates? Sigrid chimed in, saying that wasn't entirely true. Mr. Randolph answers directly to the Empress Dowager, he explained. Only then did it dawn on Mary that not all the knights worked for the Emperor. And now that she thought about it, Mr. Valentine had never actually claimed to be the Emperor's subordinate either. Back when they first met at the farm, he had never given her a straight answer. She had just assumed it all on her own, and she had believed it without a shadow of a doubt this whole time. Had she just been jumping to conclusions? But wait, if that was true, then who on earth was Mr. Valentine really? Shortly after, Louis changed into a gown with Philosopher Prince on it, while Mary looked exactly like a giant donut. Louis even found a cake-shaped hat that matched perfectly. They were having a blast when the butler walked in. Miss, it's getting late. Should I prepare the bed? Mary waved him off. No need, I'm heading back to the farm now. Suddenly, she remembered the dresses. Because she had tried on so many, she had no idea which one to choose anymore. Curse this decision paralysis. Then, she recalled that yellow dress with the bow that Louis had mentioned. That's the one, she decided. By evening, the Emperor was sitting on his balcony, reading a book. He glanced over at the farm next door. Mary was trudging home, carrying a bunch of bags. Looks like her dress situation is finally sorted out. Put the right person in the right place, and the problem solves itself. He couldn't help but pat himself on the back for his own brilliance. Now, he could finally relax. Wait a minute, why does he feel so relieved? Well, it makes sense. At the ball, Mary will be super busy with the cooking competition. By then, she won't have time to pay attention to a masked emperor. Plus, her dress issue is completely handled. Just in case she might recognize him, he had already made foolproof preparations. Of course he'd feel relieved. The emperor thought he had absolutely nothing left to worry about. But the very next day, he ran into a little chick on the road. It was the exact same one whose beak he had clamped shut the first time he visited the farm. The emperor got a massive headache. Why does he always run into this kind of crap? How on earth is Mary managing that farm? How did a tiny chick even manage to escape? A few minutes earlier, the little chick had wandered out onto the main road and got scared silly by the patrolling cavalry. When it saw the emperor, it acted like they were old buddies and jumped right onto him. Looking at the little guy in his hands, the emperor's heart softened. He tucked it into his pocket, planning to take it back to the farm later. As long as he took care of this little guy, there shouldn't be any more new problems, right? The emperor first powered through all of his state affairs, then changed clothes, disguising himself as Mr. Valentine. He picked up the chick and headed over to the farm next door. He held the chick up, comparing it to the gaps in the fence. It was clearly bigger than the gap. How the heck did it get out? And it looked like Miss Mary was already out. To keep the chick from escaping again, the emperor decided to put it inside the house before leaving. But the moment he pushed the door open, he instantly caught a pungent, dangerous scent. It was the exact same smell he remembered from his childhood. That sharp, stinging smell. The thick, sticky red. And that hidden puddle of liquid on the floor. The emperor looked over at the dining table. Papers were scattered all over it in a mess. This place had clearly been broken into. He picked up the top sheet. It was a menu submission form for the cooking competition. Was the intruder's goal related to this? Were they trying to stop Mary from entering the contest? The paper underneath was a list of required ingredients. After reading it, the Emperor's eyes widened in shock. Right at that moment, Mary appeared behind him, holding up a shovel. The Emperor spun around, saw the shovel in her hands, and yelled, "Whoa, calm down." Mary gave an awkward smile. "I'm just holding it for self-defense." Suddenly, she noticed the paper in the Emperor's hand. The Emperor quickly defended himself. "I wasn't snooping on purpose. I just came to return your chick. This little guy probably sneaked out when someone broke in." Mary said she had already figured that out, but she only guessed there would be a break-in. "I didn't expect the chick to run away, though. What did that paper look like when you first saw it?" The Emperor replied, "No special marks. It was just sitting under the other papers, clear as day. There wasn't anything mixed in at all." Suddenly, the Emperor realized that this was a trap set by Mary. Mary said, "Lately, I've had this lingering feeling that someone's been following me, but I have no idea who it could be. It naturally made me think of the cooking competition. But, if they wanted to steal information about the contest, they should have gone straight to the organizers." The Emperor figured that it must be because the Duchess's side was too heavily guarded to break into. "That's exactly why I left a fake menu on my desk. I was wondering why on earth sardine pie was on the menu. When I saw it earlier, I seriously thought your brain had short-circuited." Mary hadn't expected him to actually know about this dish. After all, only folks living in remote coastal villages would ever eat something like sardine pie. The Emperor mentioned that he had traveled far and wide, and tasted all sorts of bizarre foods. "But out of everything, sardine pie is definitely the weirdest," he said. Mary burst into laughter. "Right? A pie crust stuffed with glaring sardine heads looks absolutely terrifying. Throw in that overwhelming mix of fishy stench and raw flour, and just one bite is enough to leave that awful fishy taste lingering in your mouth for hours on end." The Emperor nodded vigorously. If someone actually makes the mistake of eating it, they'd better shut their windows right away. Otherwise, just a single whiff of that stench carrying on the breeze would literally suffocate people. Mary added that she was planning to take the original sardine pie recipe and sprinkle some fresh, fragrant parsley right on top, turning it into an even more nightmarish dish. The Emperor was confused. "Wait, isn't the sardine pie just a decoy? Why go to all the trouble of making it so detailed?" "To catch the culprit behind the scenes, of course," Mary declared. "I'm planning to head in early on the day of the competition and sneakily set this atrocious sardine pie out on display. The noble ladies definitely won't dare come anywhere near it. No one would voluntarily approach such a horrifying, stinky dish, except for the mastermind. By now, they already think my competition dish is going to be the sardine pie. They're definitely planning to ruin my dish during the contest, so making it look hyper-realistic is the safest bet." Suddenly, Mary remembered her competition dress. The Emperor looked quite smug. After all, he was the one who arranged for people to help her pick it out. "It must be an absolutely gorgeous dress, right?" he thought. "Of course it is. The greatest dress collector in the entire royal palace, Louis, was kind enough to give it to me. And the dress expert, Mr. Siegley, even helped me pick it out." The moment the Emperor heard Siegley's name, he got a terrible sinking feeling. "Wait, isn't that guy a bear pelt expert? Since when did he become a dress expert?" The Emperor decided it would be much safer to actually see Mary's dress for himself. A moment later, Mary eagerly pulled out the bright yellow dress. "Ta-da! What do you think? You can just feel the aura of victory radiating from it, right? I think it looks incredibly cool." Upon seeing the dress, the Emperor felt instantly dizzy. What the hell is this theatrical costume? I thought maybe looking at it again would help, but nope, it still looks absolutely ridiculous. Never mind this bizarre, slick, fish-like material. What on earth are these massive suspenders doing here? What the hell was Louis thinking? Why didn't she stop her? Seeing his reaction, Mary realized something was off. "Is there something weird about my dress?" she wondered. Did Louis pick this out for you?" the Emperor asked cautiously. "Nope, I picked it out myself," Mary replied. "Since it's so rare for me to enter such a massive competition, I wanted to borrow some of Louis' powerful aura. So, I went with the color and fabric that she recommended. Plus, to completely crush my opponents with sheer presence, I went with these dramatically high shoulder pads and suspenders that symbolize absolute victory." Hearing Mary's proud explanation, the Emperor rubbed his temples in pain. What the hell were those three thinking? In reality, at that time, Mary was entirely distracted, endlessly wondering, who on earth is Mr. Valentine? Meanwhile, Louis was just daydreaming about donuts, thinking, Miss Mary is just too cute. And Siegley was entirely focused on his mission. I need to keep a close eye on Louis. I absolutely can't let her do something stupid and ruin her very first friendship with another girl. The Emperor let out a heavy sigh. Look, I might not be a fashion expert, but I know one thing for sure. If you wear this thing to the competition, you're going to get laughed right out of the room. And if Louis sees people pointing and laughing at you, it's definitely going to break her heart, too. The gorgeous dress was completely wrinkled, so the Emperor suggested they try smoothing it out first. You hold onto the shoulders. I'll count 1, 2, 3, and we'll pull at the same time. Ready? Rip. Well, they successfully managed to tear the dress right in half. The Emperor was totally dumbfounded. Isn't this exactly how you get wrinkles out of a blanket? Melly hadn't thought there was anything wrong with that method either. But, what were they supposed to do now? The Emperor figured the best solution would be to just buy a new one, but the competition was only a few days away. To buy a dress of that caliber right now, he'd have to use his status as the Emperor. And the boutiques that sold dresses like that were the usual haunts of noble ladies. They were absolute hubs for high society gossip. If any rumors got out and made their way to Melly, she'd find out he was actually the Emperor. Then I'd never be able to come back here, he thought. So, the Emperor came up with a desperate workaround. Melly would just have to alter the dress herself. Melly was perfectly fine altering everyday clothes, but this is my first time ever wearing a formal dress. I haven't even seen one up close before. You've probably been around way more dresses than I have, right? Suddenly, all the pressure was on the Emperor. Well, he had seen his fair share of fancy dresses. Just this morning alone, he'd seen 27 women wearing them. Let me think carefully about what they looked like from the neck down. First, we have to get rid of these ridiculous, wrinkled decorations. You wouldn't catch anyone in the palace wearing a dress like this. Honestly, altering it wasn't that hard. It was mostly just piecing things together and copying the right style. Melly seemed to get the idea, and she brought out her trusty sewing kit. With the Emperor giving directions and Melly doing the handiwork, the dress was restyled in no time. The Emperor was pretty pleased with the result. At the very least, it was a passing grade. The fabric was already high quality to begin with, so after the alterations, it didn't look sloppy at all. In fact, it looked more like the original design. But, won't Sir Louis definitely realize that the dress has been altered? Ah, you don't need to worry about that at all. Since Louis picked out a disaster of a dress like this for you, it just proves that she absolutely wasn't in her right mind. So there's no way she remembers what this dress actually looked like. She'll completely believe this is the exact same dress, and she'll go around showing it off to everyone. And if she does that, even if Siegfried realizes the dress has been changed, he won't say a word about it. Melly really hoped he was right. Still, from the way Mr. Valentine talked, it sounded like the three of them were actually pretty close. Melly suddenly spoke up. Isn't it just about time for you to pull your usual disappearing act? The Emperor smirked. Yep, it's just about time for you to ask me to stay for dinner. But this time, Melly shook her head. Nope, I'm not making dinner tonight. That caught the Emperor totally off guard. Wait, if you're not making dinner, then what am I supposed to eat? Melly explained, since the dress crisis is sorted out, it's time to get ready for the next thing. I need to do a practice run of the dish I'm making for the competition. She paused. Wait, what's wrong with me? Mr. Valentine already left, so why am I still talking to myself? Gosh, if only there was a noble around who could help me taste test this. The Emperor cleared his throat loudly. Ahem, I haven't left yet, you know. Melly immediately shoved a plate into his hands. Perfect, then try this bread. The Emperor helplessly sat back down in his chair, staring down at the bread on the plate. He picked up a piece and took a bite. Still as delicious as always. Just then, he noticed Melly prepping some meat. Are you making a chicken dish this time? That's right, I'm going to roast it the traditional way. It's gonna be incredibly tasty. The Emperor was already starting to look forward to it. All the ingredients for the chicken dish were prepped and ready to go. Melly rolled up her sleeves and got straight to work. First, she snipped off the wingtips and the tail to trim away the excess fat. After washing the chicken, rub it down with herbed butter mixed with dried herbs. Then, stuff the cavity with garlic and bay leaves, and give the chicken a nice full body spa treatment with some premium olive oil. Finally, season it with salt, pepper, and a sprinkle of herbs, and it's ready to go into the oven. The chicken's gonna take a little while to roast. Mr. Valentine, how about I put a poached egg on some bread for you? The Emperor didn't refuse. If you're offering, I'd absolutely love one. Soon enough, a perfect sunny side-up egg was ready. She placed it on the bread, and gently poked the yolk. The Emperor took a big bite of the egg and bread together. It was just an egg, but it tasted absolutely divine. The egg white was perfectly bouncy, and the yolk was incredibly rich and creamy. There wasn't even a hint of that weird eggy smell. It was just out of this world. Mary then brought out a basket of greens to whip up a simple vegetable dish. Instead of using heavy seasonings or sauces, she just popped the veggies straight into the steamer to let their natural flavors shine. The Emperor picked up a carrot. Not only was the color super vibrant, but it also gave off this incredibly fresh and sweet aroma. She must have grown these herself, he thought. She really has an amazing gift for this. Suddenly, he heard Mary gush, wow, so handsome. Just gorgeous. The Emperor totally thought she was complimenting him. I mean, he'd heard that kind of flattery countless times since he was a kid. Is she really? He wondered, right before she said, how can a potato look this perfect? The farmers would cry tears of joy. Hearing this, the Emperor instantly crushed the carrot in his hand into mush. Mary was just admiring a potato, but the Emperor mistakenly thought she was kissing his ass. The moment he realized the truth, he was so embarrassed that he literally squeezed the carrot until it exploded. Mary asked him, "Why did you crush that?" The emperor smoothly replied, "I'm just helping you prep the ingredients. I just misjudged my own strength." Seeing how eager he was to help, Mary grabbed a basket and set it right in front of him. "Well then, how about you help me shell these beans? Shelling beans is the most fun part of prepping. Consider yourself lucky, I wouldn't let just anyone do this." The emperor stared at the beans in his hands. It was honestly ridiculous. She was actually making the Grand Emperor of the Empire shell beans. Mary left him to it. While she went back to prepping the veggies for steaming, she sliced up some carrots, popped them into the steamer, and dashed right back to the table. This time, she brought over a basket of mini corn. These baby corns are so soft and tender, you can eat the whole cob. The emperor learned something new today. A long time ago, I got completely lost in a border region. And no matter which way I walked, all I saw was corn. It wasn't until I finally found my way out that I realized it was a massive field of wild corn, because I had no idea you could actually eat the baby ones. I ended up starving for a whole entire day. Mary had no idea he'd been through such a weird adventure. He really was a strange guy. The pot of veggies was finally done steaming. Mary served up a plate for the emperor to let him do a little taste test. The emperor took a bite and was blown away. Now this was what real vegetables should taste like. The baby corn was incredibly juicy, sweet, and crunchy. The perfectly steamed cauliflower and asparagus were absolutely to die for. Wait, why did the veggies he cooked himself taste so awful? While everything she made tasted like absolute magic? Anyway, the roast chicken was finally done, too. The emperor actually offered to help carry it out, but Mary immediately shooed him away. Watching her, the emperor thought, wow, she really knows what she's doing. Mary set the beautiful roast chicken on the table, and tore off a massive drumstick for him. The emperor gently poked it with his fork, and the meat just fell right off the bone. The second it hit his taste buds, his eyes went wide. Oh my god, this is absolutely incredible. The chicken was packed with flavor, seasoned to absolute perfection. The salt and pepper sprinkled over that ultra-crispy skin was just the ultimate savory bite. The springy dark meat is just so incredibly tender and smooth. Is this what it feels like when food just melts in your mouth? And these vegetables resting under the chicken, they're completely soaked in all that rich, savory fat and meat juice. The aroma just keeps hitting me, even though they're not quite as amazing as the chicken itself. Once you take a bite, you literally can't stop. Just then, Mary brought him a glass of fruit wine. The emperor took a small sip, realizing that the fruit wine and the chicken were an absolute match made in heaven. It elevated the flavor of the meat so much, it made him want to chew up the bones and swallow them whole. Mary just stared at the emperor, unblinking. Seeing someone enjoy her cooking this much made her incredibly happy, but her intense gaze spooked the emperor, and he instantly stopped chewing. He thought he had scared her by eating so frantically. He let out a few soft coughs to cover his embarrassment. Your cooking is so unique and innovative. I'm certain you're going to do absolutely brilliantly in the competition. Mary smiled, just hearing you say that makes me so happy. After finishing the roast chicken, Mary washed the dishes and neatly put them away. She thanked the emperor again for altering her gown so beautifully. The emperor started to say, about this. Mary caught on immediately, I know, keep it a secret. I promise I won't tell a single soul. Even if I run into you at the ball, I'll pretend we've never met. The emperor quickly made up an excuse, saying he wouldn't be able to attend the ball. Hearing that, Mary felt a tiny pang of disappointment. Just as the emperor was about to leave, she called out, wait a second. She brought out her little chick and said, I take back what I said earlier about you mistreating little chicks. If it weren't for you, Tiberius would have crossed the Rainbow Bridge a long time ago. Come on, say thank you to Uncle Valentine. The emperor frantically waved his hands, insisting it wasn't necessary. Before he left, Mary insisted that he absolutely had to come back and visit the farm after the competition was over. She promised to tell him the results then, and the emperor agreed. Back in his bedchamber, the emperor slumped into his chair, reflecting on everything that had happened recently. When he first started going to that farm, his only goal was to find Mary's weakness. But somehow, somewhere along the way, his intentions had completely shifted. Sometimes, he even completely forgot he was the emperor. When he was there, he was just Mr. Valentine. Ever since he was a kid, he had always been the center of everyone's attention. Without even realizing it, he had grown obsessed with how other people saw him. He was like an actor who had been playing a role for 22 years straight, without resting for a single second. But whenever he went to that farm, he would get so caught up in devouring all that incredible food, he'd completely forget to care about his image. That had to be the reason. That must be why Ruili and the others loved hanging around that farm so much. Well, I suppose I managed to gather a little intel, at least. But none of this actually exposed her weakness. Just thinking about it all gave the emperor a massive headache. Still, there was one glaring issue he had to solve. Why would anyone want to sabotage Miss Mary? During a cooking competition? If they were planning to tamper with the food, they'd definitely use a lethal poison. Meanwhile, back at the farm, the little chick tilted its head, staring up at its owner. Mary had actually wanted to see which way Valentine went. But he vanished in a flash. She couldn't even tell which direction he darted off to. Mr. Valentine is definitely hiding something. Mary mumbled, scooping up the chick and heading back inside. She stared at the decoy menu in her hand. Well, since it already did its job, I guess I don't need this anymore. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Katie turned to her mother. Mother, this is going way too smoothly. Getting our hands on her competition menu was just too easy. It makes me nervous. I really think we need to play this safe. Before she could even finish, a vase smashed right at her feet. Her mother seized her arm in a vicious grip. That wretched farm brat brought this on herself by letting her guard down. Think about it, she's making a sardine pie just for the shock value. Katie, you're not going to keep disappointing us, are you? Do you really expect me to handle such a trivial matter for you? Though, I suppose you shouldn't even need me to teach you, right? After all, you are my daughter, Katie Diabelli. Trembling, Katie meekly agreed to her mother's words. In the early hours of the competition day, Mary, determined to make her sardine pie taste absolutely dreadful, yawned and dragged herself out of bed early to start prepping. After all, when she was fully awake, she simply couldn't bring herself to cook something that terrible. Figuring no one would actually eat something so hideous anyway, she just haphazardly scraped out the fish guts and blood. Meanwhile, the palace servants were bustling about, getting everything ready for the ball. Athena, the Grand Duke's daughter, dressed in a stunning pink gown, walked gracefully toward them, with just a single, sweet smile. She left a servant so completely captivated that they nearly tumbled right off their ladder. The Grand Duke's daughter looked exceptionally gorgeous today, just like an absolute angel. Even the girls beside her couldn't help but gush. You were definitely the star of the ball today, my lady. Hearing that completely made Athena's day. Just as her friends were about to shower her with even more praise, a maid came rushing up to Athena in a total panic. My lady, you spent so much time getting dressed up, you really shouldn't be running around like this. You promised me you would sit still. Athena smiled sheepishly. I'm sorry, I just had to visit the Empress Dowager's quarters. I wanted Her Majesty to see how beautifully I dressed up for the ball. The maid sighed fondly. You are so incredibly thoughtful, my lady. Her Majesty was in great spirits today. She held my hand so gently, and told me she hoped I'd have a wonderful time at the ball. The maids were absolutely thrilled for their lady. For a future mother-in-law and daughter-in-law to care for each other so deeply. It truly is a massive blessing for the empire. Only after blurting that out did the maid realize her slip-up. The lady and the emperor hadn't even had their wedding yet. But what did it matter? It was only a matter of time anyway. Besides, lately, the emperor's frozen heart finally seemed to be melting. The Grand Duke's daughter's wedding dress would look absolutely stunning trailing down the shoulder line. Decorated with jewels, it would be gorgeous. When that day finally comes, Our Lady will definitely be the most beautiful bride there.